Last winter, after finally getting through finals, I found myself with more free time than what I'd had in a while. This caught me off guard at first, especially since I'd been so used to hunching over my desk like a Neanderthal for the past couple of months to study, but eventually I figured out what to do with my time. I went back into my dusty, unopened Steam files and found a game sitting there, unopened since the summer. The game was called True Colors, the third installment in the Life is Strange franchise. It's a choice-based game where you follow a girl with the supernatural ability to feel anger, to feel other people's emotions more importantly. A pretty interesting concept for a video game if you ask me, and one that I was actually really interested in playing, but I pretty much dropped it after a couple hours of gameplay and I never came back to it. But with all of the stress that came with school and the multiple all-nighters that it took me to understand the single math concept, I decided that I should just treat myself to a nice and relaxing game of Life is Strange 3. And honestly, I wasn't a huge fan. I mean, it wasn't horrible or anything. I loved the concept and the art style, and one of the side characters essentially carried the entire game, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Life is Strange 2, or the iconic original version that came out all those years ago. I remember after I finished True Colors, I sort of just sat there reminiscing on all of the characters in the story, but I wasn't thinking about the game I had just finished. Instead, I actually found myself thinking back to the very first game in the series. The one that started it all. The well-known, well-loved, and heavily critiqued 2015 release, Life is Strange. Now, the normal thing for someone to do after they finish a series that they really liked would be to move on, or maybe even discuss their thoughts with other people. But I didn't really know anyone who would be willing to hear me ramble for hours on my individual and detailed rankings, and even if there was, I'd feel kinda bad if I had to force someone to listen to why I think the games are a cinematic masterpiece. Okay, so calling the games a cinematic masterpiece is, definitely a bit of an over-exaggeration, but you get the point, right? The game is not without its flaws. In fact, I love this franchise and it holds a lot of fond memories for me, but it's definitely far from perfect. If you just look up the title of the game on YouTube, you will probably get video compilations of the characters being cringy and the writing being not the best.
Ready for the mosh pit, Shaka Bra.
If you don't know anything about this game, by the way, or you just need like a slight refresher, Life is Strange is a choice-based video game that follows Max Caulfield, a high school senior who finds herself returning to her childhood home to attend a prestigious academy named Blackwell. She's shy and a little bit awkward, and she has both a talent and a passion for photography, as well as mysterious universe-altering powers, but that's beside the point. It's a video game that heavily relies on your choices and actions to determine the outcomes of both the ending and the story itself, as slight changes will occur in each episode depending on what you said or did in the previous ones. These alterations can range from the main character getting in trouble for something minor to extremities like an important side character dying. Life is Strange was sort of an indie project that was created by the video game development group Don't Nod back in 2013 with only a small group of people, and it wasn't until Square Enix, the same people responsible for this absolute piece of gold right here,
Should be safe here.
picked up the game as a publisher and allowed it to continue. The game's release was actually pretty well received, even winning a couple of video game awards throughout 2015 and 2016. It quickly grew a loyal fanbase as time went on, and it became apparent that a lot of people grew close to both the characters and the story. It covers a lot of sensitive topics which many people found intriguing and maybe even a little relatable, and the fact that it was choice-based only added to its replayability and immersion. I personally didn't discover this game until 2016 when I saw one of my favorite YouTubers play it, and I instantly fell in love with it. The style, the characters, the story itself. I had gotten so attached to the game and the characters that when I finished watching gameplay of it, I was kind of in a slight emotional wreck. I remember going online to see if anyone else shared the same love for it that I did, and instead I found a bunch of people hating on it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that people aren't allowed to critique something or even point out its flaws. I mean, at the end of the day, the only way that you can grow, especially a company creating video games, is through feedback. And honestly, some of the criticisms that the game received are accurate, and I can see where they're coming from. Even as a fan, the game is far from perfect, and it definitely has its issues here and there. But at the same time, a lot of people, including myself, really enjoyed it. Is it the best video game out there? No, but does it deserve to be hated on endlessly? Who knows? I mean, in all honesty, I'm probably the farthest thing from being a reliable critic, but after finishing the final game and thinking back on all of the installments, I guess I just sort of wanted to come back and defend the franchise. The game itself may be bad from a critical standpoint in a few parts, but a lot of people found comfort in both the characters and the story, and I feel like that's an aspect that's always getting overlooked when things are reviewed. Just because something isn't critically acclaimed doesn't mean that it can't be enjoyed, or that it should be endlessly hated on for not meeting the highest of standards. And to be fair, most of the videos out there that do critique the game are pretty respectful and they bring up a lot of good points. I mean, there aren't like active Life is Strange haters out there who are putting their time and effort into making everyone's lives miserable or anything. But I basically just wanted to put my thoughts out there to whoever would be willing to listen and explain why a lot of people, including myself, really love the series despite its flaws. Before I get into this though, I should probably clarify something else that's pretty important. Like the title says, I'm in no way a reliable critic. I'm just some random person with way too much time in their hands with a love for overanalyzing things. I don't have any experience reviewing anything, and I'm mostly just stating my opinion with probably very limited credibility. With that being said, please take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Now, I know that this game may not be the best out there, or even the best, written.
Must protect my precious so Max never has to chase it down again.
You know, it's honest work. So whether you're a fellow fan, a casual enjoyer, or even just someone who stumbled upon this video by accident, here is my completely unprofessional, probably biased, and in no way reliable review of Life is Strange. Oh, and before I forget though, this video will contain spoilers for Life is Strange, as I'll be breaking down every individual episode, and it'll probably contain minor spoilers for the rest of the games in the franchise, so do keep that in mind as you go forward. There is one more important thing that I want to address before this video officially starts, and that's a content warning. This video is going to discuss the themes that arise in the game, and some of those deal with depression, bullying, and also SA. If this isn't something you're comfortable going over, that's completely understandable, and you can feel free to put this video away or come back to it another time if it's what you want to do. With that being said, here is episode 1. The game opens up to an inviting and peaceful little screen that shows us the town of Arcadia Bay, the place that the story takes place in. It's a nice way to set up the vibe of the game as a calming guitar strum plays over an old town. The sun is setting in the background, giving off an orangey sort of hue to everything, almost making it look like an old memory, sort of blurred but also warm and friendly. It feels almost nostalgic, a common feeling in this game and one that the home screen does a great job at setting up. We're immediately ripped away from any sense of safety that the opening screen gives us though, and are thrown into the middle of a literal hurricane.
Hurricane Tortilla!
We see our main character taking a nice little nap on the muddy ground, you know, as one usually does in record-breaking weather, before she wakes up and realizes that she's severely underdressed for the cold. She has no idea how she got here in the first place, but she quickly spots a lighthouse and figures that going inside is probably better than experiencing the equivalent of being inside of a car wash. This is where the gameplay officially begins, and I just love how in this opening sequence, you can just sort of feel the fear and confusion that the main character is feeling. This is the first time you really see her, and you know less than she does about what's going on. I mean, you're basically just thrust into all of the chaos and confusion without knowing why you're here, where you even are, or any of the context behind it. You get to feel the character's confusion alongside her, and this helps add to the immersion. As our main character continues walking, she gets close enough to the edge of the cliff where we get to see the nightmare of a typhoon that's causing the storm, and it's pretty huge. Not only that, but we can see that it's getting closer to the previously peaceful town that we once saw in the main menu screen. While she's admiring the scenery, the tornado decides to throw a boat directly into the lighthouse, causing it to break and fall directly on top of her. So she wakes up in the middle of a lecture in her high school photography class, and she's attending a private high school which I'm assuming is only for seniors, but I could be wrong, called Blackwell Academy. So she's clearly a little confused, much like the player. She doesn't know how to explain or even fathom what she just witnessed, and the worst part is that no one around her even notices that anything is wrong with her. While the teacher is lecturing about some pretty creepy stuff if you pay attention.
I could frame any one of you in a dark corner and capture you in a moment of desperation. And any one of you could do that to me. Isn't that too easy?
We see someone throw a piece of paper at a girl who's quite literally doing nothing but just sitting there and minding her own business. The girl getting hit by the piece of paper, by the way, is Kate, and this is the first instance that we see of people bothering her, but it's definitely not the last. But also, how is their teacher not noticing this? I mean, yeah, he just so happens to turn around when the paper gets thrown, but wouldn't he still be able to at least hear something going on? Don't teachers have like a sixth sense for that kind of stuff? Looking around though, we also see a Polaroid sitting underneath Max's notepad, one that she took and is considering submitting into their school's photography competition, which is titled Everyday Heroes. Not entirely sure how a photo of your wall makes you a hero, but it's still nice nonetheless. Initially, when I first saw this game, I didn't really care about the image itself, and I just kind of saw it as a background piece of information. But revisiting it all these years later, it's actually kind of nice. It captures Max's character perfectly by having her stand in front of her wall full of Polaroids that she took herself and has collected over the years as her hobby has grown. It shows how her passion makes her up as a person, and it's almost like a reflection of who she is as she stares back into it while we watch from this third person. All in all, it's a pretty great photo, but despite my 5-star rating of it, she makes a comment to herself about how it's not good enough to show to her teacher, who we quickly learn is a pretty well-respected photographer and has a lot of published work. How he ended up as a high school teacher, I'm not really sure, but it does explain why a lot of students seem to sort of just gravitate towards him and trust him more over other teachers. He's closer to their age, which means that he is more prone to understanding them more, and he's also a real-life example of a professional photographer. And for photography students who want to reach a professional career, he's pretty much the best role model that they have, like Max. Anyway, she's understandably a little confused after her whole vision thing. So she decides to take a photo of herself to sort of prove that she's still there and not, I don't know, deeply delusional or something. So she takes out her little Polaroid, right? In front of the entire class, by the way, and she takes a photo of herself with flash. So obviously the teacher notices this and very publicly calls her out on this, and kind of proceeds to go on a bit of a pretentious rant.
I believe Max has taken what you kids call a selfie. A dumb word for a wonderful photographic tradition. Of course, as you all know, the photo portrait has been popular since the early 1800s. Your generation was not the first to use images for selfie expression. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Those kids that were bullying a student? Nah, you can ignore them. A girl taking a photo though? That's unforgivable. To test if Max was paying attention to his lecture, which, let's be honest, by the looks of it, 90% of the students were spacing out.
The Daguerrean process brought out fine detail in people's faces.
He asks her to answer a question about self-portraits. She unfortunately doesn't know the answer to this and gives a weak and unsure response before getting it rejected. Once the lecture ends, you can take a moment to look around and inspect every interactable object, all while hearing Max's thoughts.
Boobies.
Which I really liked. This, by all means, isn't really anything new in video games. You know, clicking on things and hearing the character respond to them is kind of a staple in most story-based games.
Edgy.
But in general, I just love when we get the option to immerse ourselves deeper into the story with these little optional bits of information. It's a good way to get to know the person you're playing as. Max goes over to check on Kate, the one who got bonked, and to put it lightly, she doesn't look like she's doing very well.
Hi, Kate. You seem quiet today.
Just thinking too much.
You can also go up to one of the desks and look at a carving that's been etched into the wood of one of the desks. It simply reads someone's name, Rachel Amber. Someone whose missing poster signs have been put at pretty much every inch of Blackwell and Arcadia Bay, as we continue to see in the story. At the game's current point, I think it's only been a couple of months since she disappeared, and she was also a student at Blackwell. You can have Max take a photo of this with her camera because apparently this is a great photo opportunity for her, and she quickly stuffs it in her pocket. This photo actually gets saved into her journal, a cool little feature that I really loved in this game. Again, nothing necessarily new or revolutionary, but it's another thing that really gives you a good insight on the character. Max's journal is an aspect of the story that gets updated as the game goes on. It includes journal entries written from her point of view of both the past and the present, and it includes detailed information about her thoughts on everything that happens around her, as well as information on most of the characters that we eventually meet. I'm someone who just absolutely loves stories that are driven by characters, so any extra bit of information that I can get on them makes me love a game even more. Also, someone that's pretty important that I should just go ahead and mention right now is the character Victoria. She's the girl that we see talking to Mr. Jefferson after class about, I don't know, whatever photography students talk about, film, Polaroids, camera batteries, the usual stuff I guess. Victoria and Max don't get along, and for pretty good reason. Victoria is everything that Max isn't. And I think deep down, she's everything Max wants to be. Someone who has the ability to both believe in themselves and to carry themselves with a lot of confidence. Victoria doesn't shy away from making herself stand out or from taking opportunities when they are presented to her. Max, on the other hand, can't even bring herself to even submit a photo to a contest without doubting herself. Deep down, I think Max is a little jealous of Victoria, and you could even say vice versa. We get the option to either interrupt the conversation, as we should, or just walk out of the classroom. Either way though, you do end up talking to the teacher since he just ends up calling you over if you try to walk out.
Excuse me, Mr. Jefferson, can I talk to you for a moment?
Yes. Excuse you.
No, Victoria. Excuse us.
Despite the fact that he called her out for not paying attention a few minutes prior,
You either know this or not, Max.
Mr. Jefferson actually believes in Max, and he even encourages her to submit her photo in their school's contest. After this though, she does eventually make her way outside of the classroom.
To all of you, American girl.
Walking around, we can get the sense of what the school is like. Despite how exclusive it is, it's pretty much just a regular high school at the end of the day. You have your usual crusty, dusty lockers, pairs of friends walking together, and even the occasional students bullying their classmates in plain sight. Seriously, where are all the teachers? We also see even more missing person posters of Rachel Amber, the person whose name was written on the table. And it's not just like a few flyers here and there, it's many stacked on top of each other. Also, just as a side note, Max's internal monologue can be really adorable at times.
I shouldn't be so stingy with my blood.
So she makes a quick trip to the bathrooms and, oh god, the bathrooms are definitely something. Do you really expect us to believe that like a prestigious private school which gets a lot of funding doesn't have the budget to have decent bathrooms? Anyway, Max goes into the nightmarish bathrooms and splashes some radioactive water on her face to freshen up a bit. She takes out her photo once again and gives it another look before she ultimately tears it up and lets it fall on the floor. At that exact same time, she spots a blue butterfly fly in from a window and go into a corner. It lands on a dirty bucket, as butterflies usually do. Max snaps a quick photo of the butterfly, which she notes almost feels magical, right as someone walks in.
It's cool, Nathan. Don't stress. You're okay, bro. Just count to 3. Don't be scared. You own this school. So what do you want?
I hope you checked the perimeter, as my step-ass would say. Now, let's talk business. You got hella cash.
That's my family, not me.
Oh, boo-hoo, poor little rich kid. I can tell everybody Nathan Prescott is a punk-ass who begs like a little girl and talks to himself.
You don't know who the fuck I am or who you're messing around with.
Where'd you get that? Come on, put that thing down!
Don't ever tell me what to do. I'm so sick of people trying to control me!
You are going to get in hella more trouble for this than drugs.
Nobody would ever even miss your punk ass, would they?
Get that gun away from me, psycho!
No!
Whoa! Somehow, for some unknown reason, Max has gone back in time to before the whole bathroom incident even happened. In this new reality that she's found herself in, no one got attacked, and everything that we saw happen at the beginning of the game happens again. The lecture, the paper throwing. Most importantly though, Max discovers that she can now go back in time. Only by a couple of seconds though. If you try to go back any further, the corners of the screen begin to warp and fall apart, resembling the edges of film being burned away. She may not be able to go back too far, but if she hurries, it should be enough time to save the stranger that she witnessed get attacked in the bathroom. Max runs back to the atrocious bathrooms once again, and she eventually figures out that pulling the fire alarm will stop the event from happening. As she's making her way out of the bathroom to evacuate for the fire alarm, she gets stopped by the school security guard. He's a little too angry at her for being in the bathroom merely seconds after an alarm went off, and he doesn't believe that she was just in there.
Do you hear that fire alarm? That means you should be outside.
I had to use the bathroom.
Girls always use that excuse.
I mean, realistically though, if you really are in a bathroom when a fire alarm goes off, you can't just be expected to sprint out of the stall with your pants halfway down. Thankfully, the principal spots Max getting harassed and intervenes. At first, this seems like a pretty kind gesture, right? Just the principal checking up on his students. Unfortunately though, he does kind of end up like not being very helpful.
You can always be upfront with me, Max. Or have you done something wrong? Is that it? Well, Max, talk to me.
This interaction eventually presents you with two options, your first major choice of many. You can either choose to report what you saw in the bathroom, or choose to hide the truth. The logical thing, and probably the best thing to do, would be to report what you saw. The thing is though, the person with the gun wasn't just any random student. The entirety of Blackwell Academy and most of Arcadia Bay is run by one super rich family, like really rich. They have enough money and power to influence anything and everything in Arcadia Bay, despite the fact that most of the residents don't even like them to begin with. Nathan, the son and eventual heir to all of their money, was the one in the bathroom. So if you decide to report what you saw, a choice which I'm assuming most first-time players chose, you get a terrible response back.
Mr. Prescott happens to be from the town's most distinguished family, and one of Blackwell's most honored students. So now you saw this, without him seeing you.
Has Principal Wells never been to a public restroom? Does he not know how stalls work? He claims that you shouldn't be making heavy accusations like this and essentially calls Max a liar. This would naturally leave you to wonder if you had picked the right choice, a common issue with any choice-based game. But what makes Life is Strange a little bit different is the fact that you can actually go back and change your choice. Since Max has the ability to go back in time, you're given multiple chances to rewind and change your choices throughout the game. This mechanic is something that the game has been criticized for on multiple occasions. At the end of the day, you play a choice-based game to sort of experience it, right? You're not just playing through it and watching the story unfold, you're actively changing and altering the narrative. The biggest part of the appeal in this genre is how your choices, your decisions, and your mistakes affect your gameplay as well as your ending. You have to make sure that you really think everything through carefully, and it adds to the immersion. If that's the entire point of the story, why would you throw it away by making it so easy to undo? Well, I don't actually think that that argument can be applied to this game. I mean, yes, the entire point of a choice-based game is to quickly choose something and stick with the consequences. If you were to remove that aspect from the game, then you would just be throwing away the appeal entirely. Despite this though, you could argue that adding the ability to see the different options before making a final decision adds more to the game. I mean, think about it. If you pick the wrong thing in a normal choice-based game and you regret it seconds later, yeah, it sucks, but you move on.
What are they gonna do to us, Kara?
I don't know, Alice. I really don't know.
If you have the chance to really weigh your options by seeing how they could go though, it adds more pressure and more meaning. It makes you really consider every possibility and it solidifies your choice instead of just having it be kind of a spur of the moment kind of thing. It adds to the importance of choosing your words and actions carefully. I mean, just take this scenario as an example. Choosing to report him didn't really get us anywhere, and even Max points out that the Prescott family has so much power that, if anything, deciding to report Nathan will only make things worse for her. So let's say that you decide to rewind. You don't report him, Principal Wells doesn't give you a side-eye for accusing their beloved student of attempted murder, and he leaves you alone. She dwells on the fact that yes, she is technically safer now, but what about everyone else? If Nathan has a deadly weapon in the school, it poses a huge danger for herself and for others. And what about the girl in the bathroom? Her life was at risk because of Nathan. Choosing to be silent about the situation is the safe choice. For the first episode and part of the second one, Max stays relatively off the radar. I, however, chose to call him out. I stuck with my choice, and because of this, Max starts getting anonymous threatening messages. And eventually, as the episode goes on, her dorm room wall gets a threatening message written on it with paint, and it ruins a bunch of her photos. To be honest, I kind of started regretting what I chose at that point, and I wondered if I had even made the right choice. So with that, we still get the same effect of the weight of our decisions, but with the added pressure of knowing that we had multiple chances to change them. It makes it feel more real and emphasizes how important our choices are. I mean, I would understand how it would take away from the story if, the game had constant higher stakes. So if we were playing an action game with a lot of quick time events and choices like, Detroit Become Human, for instance, then yeah, in that case, it's better to have us not be able to go back so that we can really feel the pressure of being in the moment. But since this game mostly consists of small interactions and a slow building plotline with few high stakes scenarios, the rewind ability fits it perfectly. Back to the actual game though, I chose to report him, and while Max debated if it was the right thing to do, she eventually made her way outside of the school. Once outside, we get a nice look at Blackwell itself. It's a relatively small school since it only has a handful of students, but it's welcoming nonetheless. We hear Nathan Prescott being called to the principal's office over the intercom as she makes her way down the concrete stairs and comes up to even more missing person poster signs littered all over the ground. It's unclear if the wind simply knocked them down or if someone actually tore them down themselves. After this, Max gets a text from her friend Warren, arguably one of the biggest sims in video game history. He basically asks her to bring back a USB or like a flash drive with a bunch of movies on it that he, let her borrow. So now we have to go to her dorm room to go get that. She teleports outside of her dorm room building, and this is where we meet my absolute favorite NPC in the entire game, Alyssa, the local fanfiction reader. Alright, so that's kind of a lie, obviously. She never canonically reads fanfictions, but I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that she does. We catch her outside reading like a studious reader, and we quickly learn that she's a fan of cheesy romances. And honestly, as she should. We fully stand Alyssa in this channel. Cheesy romance novels are better than classic literature, and you cannot change my mind. Oh, and remember Victoria, the girl from Max's photography class? So she's here again because, of course she is. Since she's in a bad mood, the entire world has to suffer with her, and because of this, Victoria and her friends decide to block the main entrance so that Max can't get inside of her dorm room. I mean, Max really can just walk past her. I mean, there's clearly space, but due to the physics of the game, she has sadly been trapped outside of her dorm and isn't able to retrieve Warren's flash drive. This is when we're introduced to our first official time-altering puzzle, my absolute favorite thing to do in this game.
Oh yes, Victoria. I'll get your bony ass out of my way.
So I'm pretty terrible at puzzles, so after trying this on my own for like 5 minutes, I got frustrated and looked up a tutorial, but for my sake, let's just pretend that I did this all on my own. First, we sneak into this little control room and turn on the sprinklers so that the water can hit them.
Are you kidding? Look at this! Chill, Victoria. It's just water. Yeah, water on my cashmere!
Sadly though, ruining her outfit with a few drops of water isn't enough apparently, and she's still being a menace to society and standing by the door. Eventually, we spot a little paint bucket that's being held loosely and honestly very dangerously over them, and after rewinding a bit, we manage to perfectly time it so that when the school janitor places the bucket over them, it splashes on Victoria's cashmere once again. Victoria sends her army of besties to go get her something to dry her clothes with, and she sits sadly on the steps, like a loser. I've been kind of hating on Victoria for the past couple of seconds, but I honestly feel kind of bad for her here. I mean, in her point of view, she just got sprayed with a sprinkler and not even a second later, splashed with a can of paint. Did she deserve it? Yeah, let's be honest, she absolutely did, but I still feel at least a little bit bad. Just a tiny bit though. We're able to get through the door now, but not before talking to Victoria. Here we're presented with another choice, to either bully her for looking like a clown, or to comfort her. It's kind of funny how these choices are presented to us. It's either comfort her or bully her to smithereens. I chose to be nice to her, and she ends up appreciating this, and they have like a kind of short-lived kind moment. The dorms are pretty average looking, save for another atrocious radioactive bathroom with toilet paper coming out of it, and we enter Max's room and get a nice little cinematic shot of... Hold on. Can Max play the guitar? We see the iconic Polaroid picture wall that was in Max's photo, which in this version of reality hasn't been ripped apart yet, since Max went back in time. So thank you, Nathan. Your threat to human life has saved Max's artwork. A true hero. Max looks in her room and realizes that she doesn't have the mysterious flash drive that we're supposed to give to Warren, who has been waiting in the parking lot for probably hours at this point. But she does, however, find a note from someone named Dana, who says that she borrowed the flash drive and that Max is welcome to come to her room to retrieve it. So she makes her way through the hallway, and just as she's about to go into Dana's room, we see a girl locking Dana in her room and refusing to let her out. So Max decides to casually slide into some drama that doesn't involve her, always a good idea, and asks what's wrong. Juliet, the girl who locked Dana in her room, is understandably upset at Max's random intrusion and questions why Max even cares about a problem that really doesn't involve her. More importantly though, she bets that Max doesn't even know Juliet's last name. And she's absolutely right, she doesn't know. Juliet gets even more angry and brushes her off without a second thought, all while conveniently revealing what her last name is.
That was truly sad. Thanks for your concern, Max Caulfield. By the way, Juliet Watson.
Lucky for Max, she has a great memory as well as rewind powers, so she uses this new information and takes a different approach when she rewinds. This time, Max casually and kind of awkwardly drops Juliet's full name to gain her trust.
Juliet Watson, nice.
So Juliet Watson is strangely flattered and decides to open up to Max. Apparently, Juliet Watson, the girl with the funny necklace, was told by Victoria that Dana, the one locked inside of the room, was with Juliet's boyfriend. The fact alone that Miss Cashmere's shirt was involved in this already lets us know that this is probably all a huge lie, so Max decides to do the right thing, which is break into Victoria's room to find proof that she was lying. Oddly enough, when we're snooping in Victoria's room, we find a tablet that's opened onto a page that shows an expensive 3D printer that she seems to be planning on buying. First of all, yikes, that's expensive. And secondly, the image being printed on the advertisement is of a deer, or a doe. This doe shows up a couple of times throughout the game, so keep it in the back of your mind. And in this image right here, it almost looks like it's in a cage with these lines drawn in the background. Another noteworthy find in Victoria's room is a defaced missing person poster of Rachel. Eventually, Max does find proof that Victoria made up the lie, and she presents it to Miss Watson, who comes to her senses and lets go of the hostage in her room.
Juliet, read this. Of course.
We quickly snapped up the USB, which took us a very long time to get, and as we're walking out of the dorm room though, our favorite NPC Alyssa suddenly gets attacked by an accidental out-of-control football, which most definitely gave her a concussion. It's probably just the world's way of punishing her for reading trashy romance novels, if we're being honest. We actually have the option to rewind and stop this from happening, which of course I did. Strangely, things accidentally hitting Alyssa is a common occurrence throughout the game, and each time you get the choice to protect her or, allow her to get attacked. It's like a fun little extra feature, a running joke of sorts, and it even allows for the two of them to bond a little bit. As you make your way further, Max actually sees the security guard from before harassing poor Kate and threatening her about something that she did. We get a pretty important choice here, which is to either step in and defend Kate, or take a photo so that we have photographic proof of the security guard bothering students. Technically, it would be nice to get actual proof, but what would a simple Polaroid prove other than the fact that the security guard and Kate just happened to be standing by each other?
I see everything here at Blackwell. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, and leave me alone.
It's also just better to be there for Kate since she clearly needs someone on her side right now. I chose to defend her, obviously, and Kate ends up really appreciating this. Okay, so now we can finally get this Warren stuff out of the way without more interruptions, and we finally get to the parking lot itself, where Warren has been valiantly waiting for like hours now. This right here is Warren.
What up, Max? How are you?
Here's your flash. Thanks.
No problem.
The man, the myth, the nerdy legend himself. Max and Warren are both actually pretty dorky, and it's nice to see them be adorable little nerds together. I know Warren gets a lot of hate since compared to another person who shall not be named just yet due to plot reasons, he's the lesser quote-unquote romantic option. But friendship-wise, I think they make a really good team.
I'm feeling pretty alpha now.
He's not that bad for someone who gets friend-zoned for the entirety of the game. Max and Warren are both characters that are on the outside of the Blackwell hierarchy. As we've established, Max is shy and can often struggle to befriend those around her. Warren is no different. He's really into science, and due to his interests, he often gets picked on by others. They have this in common, and because of this, they became really great friends. Say what you will about Warren, but he's always there for Max when she needs support, and vice versa. Since they already have a close friendship established, Max comes really close to actually telling him about everything that happened to her with her time-traveling abilities when the bathroom menace himself decides to interrupt their conversation. Since I chose to report him, he gets really angry at Max and starts threatening her. And not just like regular threats, borderline violent ones. I mean, this dude literally had Max in a chokehold, but thankfully Warren quickly intervenes and he ended up getting punched in the eye instead. I'm fully convinced that Nathan would have hit Max too if it weren't for a car suddenly driving through the parking lot and nearly hitting all of them. And it's not just any car, by the way, it's specifically a car that belongs to the blue-haired girl from the bathroom. More specifically, Chloe Price, Max's former best friend.
Max? Chloe?
So anyway, Max gets bonked by Nathan while Max hops into Chloe's car and they make a quick getaway. Fly high, buddy. During their nice little drive through Arcadia Bay, we learn a little bit more about their previous dynamic and how it has changed. Max and Chloe were childhood friends. They both grew up in Arcadia Bay and were inseparable for years, up until a couple years ago when Max's family moved out of Arcadia Bay and into the neighboring state into Seattle. This move couldn't have happened at a worse time though, as it unfortunately happened soon after Chloe's dad got into a car accident and passed away. Even though both the move and the accident weren't at all Max's fault, we quickly learn that Chloe holds a lot of resentment towards Max for seemingly abandoning her in her time of need.
Don't you think I'm happy to see you?
No. You were happy to wait 5 years without a call or even a text.
I'm sorry. I know things were tough on you when I left.
How do you know? You weren't even here.
This isn't the first instance that we hear mentions of Max supposedly abandoning Chloe. And I say supposedly because with proper context, Max honestly wasn't really in the wrong here. Not that much, at least. It is terrible that Max basically stopped all contact with Chloe after a while, but can you really blame her for this? I mean, she was like a kid when this happened. It's incredibly difficult to keep constant contact with someone long distance when all you have is a home phone, especially at that age. As someone who's moved around a few times and has been in and out of both schools and friend groups as a result, it's really hard to keep those close ties no matter how hard you try. I mean, I'd understand if they were like both adults or maybe even teenagers when it happened, because at least they have more access to visiting each other, but you can't really blame a kid for not visiting you or talking to you as much as they did from a whole state away. I mean, what was Max gonna do? Hotwire her parents' car and drive hours to see her friend? The girl could barely reach the steering wheel herself. At the same time though, I'm not gonna hate on Chloe for grieving either. Chloe Price gets a lot of hate, and not just from critics of the game, even fans for her actions throughout the story. To put it as lightly and as respectfully as I can, she makes a lot of stupid decisions throughout the game, and most annoyingly, she constantly places the blame for her quality of life on everyone and everything around her instead of taking any sort of accountability, which, to be fair, at least she's self-aware of.
You can't keep blaming me and everybody for everything wrong in your life.
Gotta blame somebody, otherwise it's all my fault.
Chloe definitely makes mistakes, hundreds actually, and she can be annoying and very defensive as well as very hot-headed. But I think it's important to keep in mind that Chloe was a kid when she lost the person who meant the entire world to her, and she never fully recovered from this. I have so much more to say about Chloe, but for the sake of keeping some sort of suspense, as well as my sanity and yours, I'm gonna save this rant for a much later part of the video where I talk about the characters. As hostile and argumentative as our catcher bride gets, we still get a sense of familiarity and closeness from their conversation. Things may have ended abruptly and bitterly between them, but at the end of the day, they're still glad to see each other. I mean, they were the definition of besties when they were kids. It's kind of hard to let that stuff go even after some time has passed. No matter how hard Chloe tries to point out how terrible of a friend Max has been, which she does way too much in the first episode, they're both still glad to see each other. Their connection hasn't been completely lost, even after 5 years of not speaking. If you remove the initial toxicity of their friendship, I actually really like their dynamic. Max is awkward and shy, and she wants to help everyone that she can. And Chloe is this rebellious force to be reckoned with who refuses to back down from any challenge. At their best and most caring, they bring out the best in each other and balance each other out perfectly. Even as the game goes on, they begin to influence each other's personalities for the better. Seeing that Max's camera is broken, Chloe actually offers to take her back to her house where her stepfather has a bunch of tools that should be able to help her fix her Polaroid. As we explore the once familiar house, Max begins to recall her memories. Seeing everything from her point of view is a little bit strange at first. She'll look at objects and rooms and think back to them fondly, recalling things that happened, meanwhile we, as the player, have no idea what she's talking about. Regardless of this though, the game does a pretty good job at catching you up on their history even though we're on the outside of it. The game has Max recall all of her memories, and we also get to hear audio of when they were kids when they would talk to each other. This lets us know how close they were without actually dumping a lot of exposition and info at us. It's very bittersweet when you hear fragments of their past and how hopeful they used to be. We even see a painting that they made years ago, now defaced due to time. We never get to see these characters and their dynamic before the events of the story, for the most part at least, so this is an excellent way of establishing their once strong connection which has now fallen apart. It's a plotline that we don't see very often, at least for me, when we have two characters who used to be so close but for whatever reason they got ripped apart and are left with the broken fragments of their relationship that they now have to fix. It's a really interesting setup, and it allows for both character development and interest as you get to find out and sort of piece together why things fell apart for them. Once upstairs, Max starts casually going through all Chloe's drawers, and inside of one we actually see a postcard to Chloe from someone named Rachel Amber, the girl whose missing posters we see everywhere. Not only do we see a postcard from Rachel, but there's also a photo of Chloe and Rachel together.
Hey, give me that!
Sorry, I wasn't trying to be nosy.
Okay, Chloe, a metal box under the bed equals secret.
Chloe begins to explain that after her dad died and Max moved away, Chloe met Rachel and, as she puts it, Rachel essentially saved her life. They were close friends, and although it's never directly stated, it's pretty much heavily implied that Chloe was in love with Rachel, and vice versa, and they were even planning on eventually ditching Arcadia and moving to LA together.
She was my angel.
Your mom?
As she continues on to explain, 6 months before the game started, Rachel seemingly just vanished. Although she doesn't believe that Rachel just simply left for LA on her own, and she suspects that there's some sort of foul play involved. She hasn't been able to find the proper evidence or even the support to back any of this up though. There seem to be only 2 real possibilities here. Rachel used Chloe for the entirety of the relationship until she could get enough money to move out by herself, or someone did something to her, which is a much scarier possibility and just as hurtful. She states that Rachel would never just abandon her, but it's hard to believe that there isn't at least a small part of Chloe that isn't struggling with that possibility as well. Chloe is the only one that has been making an actual effort to find Rachel, and she was the one that's been putting up all of those missing person signs. It's hard to hate on Chloe for being mad at Max and bringing it up constantly with this extra information being added into the mix. She's essentially been abandoned by everyone she's ever loved, either intentionally or because of something that was out of her control. I'm not excusing her actions or saying that she has a free pass to act like a buffoon, but it adds important context. After their little trauma dump session, Chloe asks Max to put on some sad music while Max goes into the garage and looks for the tools that she needs. With some extra snooping around the house, we find a military dog tag with the name that coincidentally matches the name of the paranoid security guard from Blackwell. Huh. I wonder if they could be the same person. No, but that wouldn't be possible. That's just...
Little.
Fuck you, pig!
Oh. To put it very lightly, Chloe and her stepfather do not get along. In fact, her mom deciding to marry David, the guy's name by the way, definitely caused an even deeper rift in their relationship. The garage has basically been turned into David's hangout zone, but it's also full of a bunch of really sketchy things. The first thing you'll notice is a little gun shrine with one mysteriously missing, and as you snip through his files, there's also images of Kate taken from a distance. Worst of all, in one of his cabinets, there's live camera footage of the hallways inside of the house, as well as a hidden camera in some of the rooms. It's insanely creepy and crosses so many lines, especially since I'm pretty sure that neither Chloe nor her mom know about these cameras. We do end up finding the tools though that Max needs, and we go straight to Chloe, who was in a slightly better mood now. Max sets up her workstation on Chloe's incredibly messy desk, but she still isn't able to fix her Polaroid. Chloe witnesses Max's mental breakdown on not being able to fix her vintage camera, and she goes up to her to try and cheer her up. This, though, is when Chloe spots the photo of the blue butterfly that Max took in the girl's bathroom. And this is enough for Chloe to connect the dots and realize that Max was in the bathroom when she nearly got attacked.
You took this photo, you brat? In the bathroom today. You set off the alarm. That's why Nathan raged after you. You hella saved my life.
Chloe thanks Max for saving her life and goes on rummaging through a couple of drawers. She actually digs up her dad's old camera and gives it to Max, telling her to think of it as a late present for Max's recently passed 18th birthday. This was likely the last physical memory that she had tied to her dad, and we can even see how she hesitates for a moment before ultimately deciding to give it to her. It's incredibly kind and a meaningful gesture, but I will take away one point because Chloe didn't say happy birthday. Since Max now has her prized possession, as she says, Chloe takes the photo of the butterfly for herself as a trade.
Now that we got that mushy shit out of the way, I feel like stage diving. Let's thrash this place. Yo, turn it off! Turn it off!
How many times have I told you to stop blasting that punk shit?
You need to hide now. My stepdad will kill me if he finds you here.
Max runs into the closet to hide so that she doesn't get in trouble for visiting a friend, since we all know that visiting someone is one of the most atrocious crimes that you could commit in the state of Oregon. David originally only wanted to go into her room because one of his guns is missing from its case, and let's be honest, he was probably right in making the assumption that Chloe took it. Once he does come into the room though, he discovers that Chloe has been smoking and things quickly escalate from here. We're again presented with another option here, to either intervene and claim that the cigarette was Max's, or to let Chloe take the fall for her own actions. This is kind of a lose-lose situation for Max. If she steps out of her hiding spot in the closet and takes the blame, David is gonna remember her as some random kid who's a bad influence on his stepdaughter. However, choosing not to do anything is far worse, since David literally slaps Chloe as their fight intensifies. Because of this, I chose to take the fall and David proceeds to ban Max from coming to his house again. Now that she trusts us a little bit more, she decides to very recklessly reveal to us that she did in fact steal the gun.
I'm Price. Chloe Price. Bang!
Jesus, put that thing down!
They eventually sneak out of the room through the window, an interesting detail if you take into account something that Max remembered previously. Earlier in the game, when we first go into Chloe's room, Max actually points out in her monologues that they used to dare each other to step out of that window, but they never did because they were too scared. 5 years later though, they do it without hesitation. They make their way to a cliff on the edge of the ocean with a lighthouse, the same lighthouse that we saw in the thunderstorm at the beginning of the game, and we also see a deer watching both Max and Chloe from a distance. It's not until we're finally at the top of the hill and we sit down with Chloe that we found out the context behind the whole bathroom situation. Chloe owes a certain person a lot of money, and because of this, she desperately needed to pay them back. She figured that she could get this money out of the richest kid in Arcadia by meeting him at a bar. Nathan, however, had his own plan and actually decided to spike Chloe's string.
I figured I would make him pay me to keep quiet. So we met in the bathroom. And he brought a gun. That was Nathan's last mistake.
Quickly after this is revealed, Max is brought back to her previous vision that she had at the start of the game. The difference this time though is that we actually have a little deer guiding us, and when we get to the top of the hill we once again see the giant hurricane. Chloe brings Max out of her trance, just in time for the iconic ending sound of the episode to play. It had been years since I had last heard this song, and hearing it again after so long just brought back so many fond memories. Max decides to open up to Chloe about her power. At first, she's understandably confused and doesn't believe her. However, not even seconds after her confession, it starts to snow despite the fact that it's scorching hot outside. This strange weather event, coupled with Max's whole confession, finally convinces Chloe that maybe she's telling the truth. The ending cutscene shows us some shots of Arcadia Bay and its citizens. Some we've seen before like Principal Wells or Warren, and some we haven't, like this man and his dog or this woman working the night shift at a diner. We're also shown a clip of Kate who's quietly crying in the corner of her room while the sun sets through her open window, and another shot of Victoria angrily ripping down a missing person poster of Rachel while snow falls around her. This is a beautiful scene paired with the music, but it's made ominous by the final shot of a mysterious row of red files in a dimly lit room. Every single one of these files has a name written on it, but one of them stands out among the rest and it looks like it's been used recently. The file simply reads Rachel. Episode 2, titled Out of Time, begins with Max waking up in her dorm room wearing some questionable fashion choices. She and Chloe exchange a couple of honestly adorable back and forth messages before they decide to meet up at a diner where Chloe's mom works. Max is a little bit stinky though, so she figures that it's probably a good idea to shower so that she doesn't reek when she goes and meets her friend. We make a quick lap through the hallway, save Alyssa from getting smacked by a runaway toilet paper, and come across this monstrosity outside of Dina's room. We see Juliet again, and unfortunately for her, I don't care about her last name anymore because the first thing she does when you speak to her is gossip about a video that's been going around about Kate, which has caused Kate to get bullied tremendously. The video of Kate is very important, and I'll talk about it in just a bit, but before that, we need to get Max to the shower because, again, she literally stinks. Inside of the dorm bathroom, we see Kate, who somehow manages to make brushing her teeth look sad. She doesn't really seem to be doing well, but she does thank Max for standing up to her when David was bothering her. Max, put those dogs away, you're gonna get like 7 different types of foot funguses. She also asks if Max can bring back a copy of a book that she let her borrow, and after agreeing, she finally goes into the rusty showers. While she's scrubbing her piojos away, she hears Victoria and her 2 besties walk in and immediately go up to Kate. They start mocking her about the video, which causes Kate to walk out of the bathroom on the brink of tears.
You're going to be sorry someday.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Victoria continues to talk about the video, and she even implies that Nathan was the one that caused Kate to act the way that she did. Instead of moving on with her life, Victoria decides that it would be hilarious, I guess, to write the link to the video on the mirror with lipstick. Ignoring Victoria's awful decision making for a second, I should probably talk about the video in question. Without going into too much detail, since this is YouTube and all, a couple days ago in the story, the Vortex Club, which is like a little exclusive club full of all the rich and mean kids, I guess, at Blackwell, held one of their annual parties. In that party, Kate presumably got drunk, emphasis on the presumably, and started acting a little bit quirky, and she basically started smooching a bunch of other students. Someone recorded this and posted it online, and ever since then, Kate's been getting heavily bullied at school. She goes back into her room to change, but this time something is very wrong and very different. So remember how I made the decision to report Nathan a while ago? That didn't go without its consequences. Max's photo wall, the photos that defined her as a photographer and were basically a collection of her memories and her hard work, was painted over with a threatening message in red. Someone broke into her room, I'm guessing either Nathan or Victoria, and vandalized her room and her art. And it's not just like some dumb prank, it's like an actual threat for her to watch her back. She even receives a couple more anonymous threatening messages as the episode goes on. But who cares about her safety and well-being when we have to return Sweet Kate's book? We make it to Kate's room in a scene that's honestly just depressing. So far, every dorm room we've seen is bright and colorful, each one showing us a piece of the character's personality. Max's was full of photographs and books, even a little gift from her family. Victoria's was full of expensive photographic posters and high-end equipment. But Kate's? In all honesty, Kate's room is just devastating and a little bit ominous too. The lighting disappears from the screen the moment we enter her room, and we're left in a dimly lit area void of any real color, or even light for that matter. There are clothes and books scattered all over the floor in a mess. There are even some stains on the ground. Worst of all, Kate's mirror has been covered up with a cloth, showing us that after everything that's happened, she can't even stand to look at herself. All of the windows are closed shut, an interesting detail if you compare it to the previous ending scene of episode 1, where her window was still open, noting the fact that the sun was setting and leaving her without hope. There's also this weird chicken poster hanging over her bed. At the bottom of the poster, there's a little speech bubble that says help, but it's not pointing at the chicken, it's actually pointing below to where Kate sleeps. Max proceeds to do what she does best, snoop around, and we find a couple interesting things. There's a kind postcard from her father, reassuring her that he'll always be there for her, and in contrast, we find a letter from her aunt, putting her on blast basically, and calling her some very unkind words because of the video. We've managed to build enough trust with Kate since we defended her against David, and she thanks us for caring about her. She opens up to us and explains everything that happened with the video. She attended the Vortex Club party where everything went down. Despite the fact that the video exists, she has no recollection of any of it ever happening, suggesting that she wasn't sober when it was filmed.
Basically, I went to one Vortex Club party and ended up making out with a bunch of people. And I have no memory of it.
The thing is though, Kate doesn't drink, so how did she get like that in the first place? She says that she remembers feeling really sick and dizzy before Nathan, our favorite evil villain, offered to take her to the hospital, something she noted is unusually nice of him to do.
And I woke up in a room. I thought it was a hospital because it was so white and bright. Somebody was talking to me in a soft voice. I thought it was a doctor until I heard Nathan and felt a sharp sting in my neck.
And?
That's all I remember. I don't know what happened. I woke up outside my dorm room the next day.
From what we heard, they both quickly come to the conclusion that Nathan most likely put something in her drink, similar to what he did to Chloe. As their conversation comes to an end, we get another major choice here. She asks if she should take this information and go to the police or collect evidence first. I decided to advise her to go to the police, definitely not because I looked at the answers on Google or anything, because this will make her feel like she has real allies on her side. And most importantly, it'll prove that Max believes her despite her lack of physical evidence, which is what she needs most at the moment, someone to believe her. Outside of the dorms, on our way to the diner, we spot Warren again with a now black eye from taking a hit from Nathan the day before. Max confides in Warren and explains that the Prescotts are not after her because she reported him. For some reason, Warren thinks this is the best time to ask her out on a movie date.
Let's go ape!
And I kind of pump after him since he did pretty much take a hit for her. So I was like, sure, Warren, let's go to the movies. As friends. As buddies. As pals. Remember that woman at the diner we saw at the end of episode 1? It turns out that that lovely lady is none other than Joyce, Chloe's mom. I really wish we would have gotten to see or at least hear more of Chloe's relationship with her mom. The game makes it pretty clear that the quality of their relationship plummeted after she married David, but we never really get to see how their relationship was before the marriage. We constantly hear about how close she was with her dad, but we only see the aftermath of her and her mom. Chloe often talks about wanting to leave Arcadia Bay on multiple occasions, so she clearly doesn't really have an attachment to her family or the town itself, but it's not like they hate each other either.
You only get one damn slice of bacon a day.
I don't know, I guess it would have just been nice to see the game expand on their dynamic instead of the little snippets that we ended up getting. Joyce is actually kind of cool. She's hardworking and stern, but she's also very warm and caring. She makes sure to get Max in trouble for smoking in her daughter's room, according to what David told her at least, but she's still always very welcoming towards Max and treats her as if she were her own daughter. She's also the only person who understands David as it seems and is patient with him despite his past trauma from being at war. All in all, for a background character, she's pretty cool and I like her. Chloe arrives fashionably late, which is kind of hypocritical if you ask me, since not even that long ago she was literally blasting Max's phone with angry texts about how she should hurry up and meet her. But once she arrives, it's time for another little minigame. Basically, Chloe believes Max's powers exist, but she also kind of doesn't, which is understandable. So to prove that Max does have the ability to rewind, she wants us to guess everything that she has in her pocket as solid proof. After guessing what's in her pockets, we go back and forth a bit, rewinding and time traveling and telling her events that will happen at the diner around them, like two people arguing and oddly enough a cockroach landing on the jukebox, which I didn't even notice but apparently chose correctly as an answer. She's impressed and concerningly, she seems to see Max's powers as more of a fun party trick instead of something that's extremely delicate and dangerous.
This isn't a toy, Chloe. I do have to be careful how I use it.
Screw that! Of course it's a toy!
This is kind of common in the game, especially in moments where she gets really angry or desperate. She has a very reckless attitude towards her friend's power, and doesn't really seem to grasp the fact that serious consequences can come from going back in time over and over again. So Chloe is officially convinced, and she invites her to go to a mysterious hangout zone with her, but as they're about to leave, Max gets a phone call from Kate. At this, Chloe decides to turn on her possessive and slightly toxic mode and gets mad at her for having a social life outside of their tiny bubble. You get another pretty important choice here, where you can either ignore Kate's phone call and follow Chloe, or make Chloe wait like literally 2 seconds and answer your friend who is in dire need of support. This has to be one of Chloe's worst moments. I can see why, not understanding, and I'm definitely not defending, the reason as to why Chloe is acting this way, but it doesn't really make it any better. I mean, yeah, sure, she did finally get her best friend back after so many years, and after losing another one, she's just jealous and probably scared of losing her again to someone else. I can see the reason, but it's just incredibly selfish. And as much as I love her, it's super toxic. We still go with her, by the way, like, it's not like she just leaves us. She just has a little bit more of an attitude in the next scene. Speaking of the next scene, what sort of super romantic and important place did Chloe have to show us that was so important that it warranted her getting angry over a 2-second delay? A junkyard. A literal junkyard. This place is important to Chloe, as we find out later on in the scene though. This was like her little getaway from home, and she and Rachel would go here often to de-stress or, I don't know, do crazy shenanigans or whatever it is that high schoolers do after school. So when we get to the junkyard, Chloe is a lot passive-aggressive since we apparently betrayed her by answering a phone, but she says she wants to show us something cool. With her gun. This is not gonna end well. She makes us go find targets for her to practice shooting at, and we walk around the junkyard to find glass bottles. During our search, we see a little deer once again, super far away. And if you get the chance to take a photo of it with her camera, the deer doesn't actually show up in the Polaroid after it develops, which is kind of spooky. We bring the bottles to Chloe and she starts shooting them, and we help her aim with the help of her rewind powers.
Aim a bit to the right. Sir, yes, sir. Oh, yes! Did you see that shit, Max?
Duh.
Until Max's nose starts to bleed again and she passes out on the worm-infested dirt. I'll give Chloe some points here. She does stop everything that she's doing to pick her up. I mean, this is like bare minimum behavior when you really think about it, but again, it's a pretty cute moment, and Chloe finally gets the sense that the power shouldn't be taken lightly, and she does start to be a little bit more careful from then on. I don't know if you remember the guy at the end of the final cutscene, the one with the dog, but now it's his turn to make a cameo. This terrifying man right here is Frank, a dealer who Chloe owes a lot of money to. He very rudely interrupts their bonding moment and starts threatening Chloe and demanding for his money back. Things escalate even more when she notices that Frank is actually wearing a bracelet that belonged to Rachel. Max gets scared, and the next thing we know, she's pointing the gun at him. We get another decision here, either shoot Frank or don't shoot him, and I chose not to shoot him because I don't feel like doing that personally. But he ends up confiscating the gun from them, and Chloe gets mad at Max for allowing him to take the weapon, but honestly, I'm fine with the decision that I made. I really don't trust Chloe with the gun. Also, I'm pretty sure if you choose the shoot option, you don't actually shoot him, you just like shoot near him. But Frank comes up on later in the game, and it's probably best to have him not hit you in the future. In the next scene, they make their way to the railroad, and it's kind of cute. They walk side by side, balancing by holding hands while they talk. They have a nice little heart-to-heart about, you know, the money Chloe owes. They even talk a little bit more about Rachel, and I think this is a point where they like officially decide that they're gonna figure out what happened to her. As much as I love this little scene, isn't it like incredibly dangerous to stand on railroad tracks? Something about like getting stuck or something.
Help! I'm stuck!
Okay, so Chloe is like actually seconds away from getting unalived because her steel-toed lemon pepper steppers got caught under the tracks, and the only way we can get her out is to climb up a tiny hill where the control station is for the train, so we can switch the tracks so that they run beside her and not directly into her. All in the span of like 15 seconds, by the way, so no pressure or anything. Seriously, this scene was so incredibly stressful for me. What makes the whole situation even more dire is the distant train horn that you can hear, and when it starts getting closer and closer, you can hear like Chloe just yelling for help in the background. Needless to say, you have to rewind a lot of times in this part. After having a couple of heart attacks and maybe a stroke or two, I finally managed to save Chloe, and I got her out just in time.
My powers might not last, Chloe.
That's okay. We will. Forever.
This is when Max realizes that her class is about to start, so they drive back to Blackwell. Back at school, she makes her way to her photography class where she sees some commotion. Kate seems as distressed as ever as she argues with the teacher, who doesn't seem to be very supportive of her situation, and she storms off looking miserable. We go over there to confront him and see what's going on, and his response is just terrible.
Kate is being humiliated daily.
What if Kate brought this on herself?
Excuse me? Don't you have like some photos to take or something? A class to teach? Something useful to do with your time? And by the way, he doesn't even believe Max about what happened with Nathan, even though he claims to be an advocate for her. He tells us that he'll look into it, which, let's be honest, it's not going to do anything, seeing how little the staff actually cares in the school. With that whole mess out of the way though, we get into class, and Kate isn't there since we just saw her leave. Everything goes on normally. Strangely normally, since we don't usually sit in class lectures in game without having something to do in them. But we're just sitting here, listening to the teacher lecture for a couple of seconds, until someone runs into the classroom and calls everyone to the girls' dorm room where something is going down.
Yo! Some crazy shit is going down in the girls' dorm!
Zachary, do not come into my class like that ever again.
So before I get into this next section, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a quick warning here. If you've seen the game before, you probably know what's gonna happen next, and while it's nothing necessarily violent or graphic, it does include heavy mentions of, and I seriously apologize for the word that I'm gonna use because it sounds really insincere, but this next section does mention and heavily talks about depression and unaliving. Again, I'm sorry for a lack of a better word, but I just want to avoid using the real one since this is YouTube and all of that. But yeah, if that's not a topic you're comfortable hearing about, that's of course totally understandable, and I'll leave timestamps on the screen so you can sort of skip that section. Do keep in mind though that I will mention this part of the game very briefly a couple more times throughout the video, and if that's not something you want to go over, again, totally understandable, and you can feel free to, go ahead and put the video away. With that being said though, I will go ahead and move on to the next part of the episode. So to sum up the scene though, Max goes to the girls' dorm room and sees that there are already a lot of people outside. She looks up and sees that Kate is at the very top of the building, seconds away from jumping, but she quickly uses her rewind powers, or at least she tries to. She isn't able to go far enough to be able to reach the top of the building, but she keeps trying over and over again and fighting through headaches and nosebleeds, and it's a pretty desperate and scary moment, but eventually everything around her just stops. She looks up to see that everyone and everything is frozen, in a state of going in and out of motion. The scene around her almost looks holographic, between frames, and even though Max looks like she's falling apart, she eventually and painfully slowly makes it to the top just in time for her powers to give out. Depending on the choices that you made in the game previously, like choosing to answer her phone call, telling her to go to the police, and defending her against David, even small little details like looking through her cards in her room to find out her relationship with her family, your outcome can change. And this isn't something you can rewind, this is finalized. Kate either lives or doesn't, depending on your previous choices. I already knew in advance what to choose, so I did have an advantage, so in my playthrough, I did end up saving her. After that whole scene happens, we're thrown into another cutscene in Principal Wells' office, this time joined by David, Mr. Jefferson, and Nathan.
Now, I know today was difficult for everybody, but I'm so proud of the way Blackwell pulled together to save a young girl's life.
Last I checked, every single person in this room did absolutely nothing to stop this from happening, but go off, I guess. You're given the choice to either blame Mr. Jefferson for sucking at being a good teacher, blame David for being creepy and bothering Kate, or blame Nathan for being the epitome of evil. I took this chance to essentially place all the blame on Nathan, and to accuse him of spiking Kate's drink at the party, which he most definitely did, and because of this he actually ends up getting expelled. Soon after, we see Max talking to Warren outside of the school about everything that happened while the sun sets in front of them. It's nice to see that Warren is there for Max, but even this sweet moment doesn't last long.
What the hell is this?
There was no eclipse scheduled today. I would know. I would.
The cutscene that follows shows us both people close to Kate and people who have nothing to do with her, simply going on about their lives. People both unaffected and affected. We see a lot of previous characters once more, like Rick and his dog, and look, I know David isn't the best character in the game, and he's not a lot of people's favorites, and I can see why, but I do appreciate this little clip where we're shown how he's reacting to the situation, talking to Joyce, and she gives him a comforting hug. He's a very complicated person with lots of past trauma, and I can't really excuse everything that he does, but here we do see that he isn't just some heartless monster, he's just a deeply wounded person who has regretted his actions. It also shows a silent conversation between the principal and presumably Nathan Prescott's father, someone we never actually see in-game, but we can feel his influence and heavy presence around us nonetheless. We're also shown Kate in the hospital staring out into the door, and strangely, the way that the camera pans out makes it look like she's being watched. The music builds up as it pans over more of Arcadia Bay residents going on about their lives, and as the instruments die down, we're given another glimpse of the previous mysterious room with those files. This time, we see a file labeled Kate, along with an eerie pan over a desk. There's something that looks like an empty bottle of alcohol, a box cutter, and medicine bottles. Whatever is going on underneath everyone's noses has not been resolved yet and has only gotten worse. What's the best way to get over a traumatic event? Is it by going on a nice and relaxing walk? Talking to someone about your crippling mental issues? Maybe even going to therapy? All of those answers are wrong. It's actually by going on a fun little date with your bestie. Breaking and entering edition. This episode starts off pretty recently after the events of the last one, with Max waking up to a text from her friend in the middle of the night. Kate's bunny also makes a little cameo from the previous episode, meaning that Max decided to take in her temporarily while Kate was in the hospital, or worse, depending on which ending you got. The threatening message is still on Max's wall as she leaves the room, serving both as a subtle reminder that every single one of your previous actions has consequences. So Max makes her way through the dark and empty hallway with nothing but a small flashlight from her prehistoric iPhone to guide her way. The limited light available paired with the scary background music and the occasional faraway thump made me way too scared, but I'll definitely give them, some points for effectively setting a scene's mood. As we walk through the hallways, we see a lot of people have written encouraging messages about Kate on their mini whiteboards. Even Victoria, which is super ironic since she was the main one driving all of the bullying in the first place. I mean, I'm not saying that she's incapable of feeling regret and that she isn't at least a little bit sorry for what she did, but it's a little too late to just turn around and say sorry. It's almost as if severely bullying and instigating the hatred of someone who's clearly struggling has horrible consequences. Who would have known? After getting politely jump scared by the one and only
Booyah! Get it? Booyah. Like I'm a scary punk ghost.
They start making their way to the school and quickly hide once they see Mr. Jefferson stepping out of the main school entrance with Victoria.
I don't know what I would have done if Katie jumped.
Katie? I had no idea you two were that close. Did she?
Well, how does this affect the Everyday Heroes contest?
That monstrosity aside, it's time for a heist. I actually kind of like this part of the game, even though it was kind of short. Something about being at a school at night is just so intriguing, you know? No one is around, it's dark and mysterious and a little bit creepy, and you get to see what a usually populated area looks like when it's empty. There's also slightly creepy music playing in the background, which kind of reminds me of that little rush of adrenaline that you get before entering a haunted house or doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing. They try to open the principal's office and surprise, surprise, it's locked. They can't seem to find the key anywhere, so Max gets the bright idea to create a miniature bomb to explode the lock off the door, and by now we can pretty much see that Chloe's recklessness is really rubbing off on her. She texts Warren, who answers very quickly by the way, and he apparently has a lot of knowledge about this stuff, and he sends us on a mini fetch quest to find everything we need for the concoction.
Just send the text instructions now. Yes, I'm still all in to go ape with you at the drive-in. Thanks for the help.
Max gathers the supplies, assembles it with ease, and they stick it onto the door. The sudden explosion sets off an alarm.
Oh, we are toast! Here comes the whole Arcadia Bay Fire and Police Department.
But getting caught would sort of get in the way of their heist, so Max decides to go to the other side of the door and rewind before the bomb even goes off so that they can both open the door from the inside and avoid the explosion. It's kind of confusing, but also kind of cool when you think about it. Kind of like a loophole or a paradox, or is that what a paradox is? Once you open the door to a very impressed Chloe,
I have no clue how the hell you got in there, but you did it, sister.
you begin to snoop around the Principal Wells' office, which looks like it was ripped right out of someone's Dark Academia Pinterest board. Inside, you find files on Nathan, which are pretty much squeaky clean, like there's nothing bad about him, until they actually go into the files, the hidden files inside of the computer. These files are full of information about how he has a history of getting bad grades, horrible I know, but also getting a lot of complaints from teachers as well as warnings. Of course, all these things were quickly thrown under the rug since the Prescott family runs the school from the sidelines. But what stands out the most about their findings is a strange and creepy black and white sketch. It's mostly scribbles quickly scratched onto paper in an almost quick and desperate way, as if whatever made him draw this was haunting him, and the words "Rachel in the darkroom" are repeatedly written on it over and over again. Having found everything that they need, they begin to leave, but not until Chloe opens up a drawer and finds a folder full of money. Like, a lot of money.
Wowzer.
Specifically, enough money to pay off her debt to Frank. The only downside about this? Well, other than the fact that you'd be stealing a very large amount of money, which would sort of make you a criminal, it's specifically money that was raised for a charitable cause for the school. That's why when Chloe tried to convince Max to let her keep the money, I just quickly shut her idea down, and she gets really mad at her for this, but like, there's so much wrong with this idea. You'd be taking away a lot of money from a cause that needs it, a literal charity, and I feel like it would only worsen their situation, you know, if they find out that they stole a lot of money. Even though she's mad at Max, she is contractually obligated to stay by her side until the end of the game, so who's the real loser here? They get everything they need at this point. You know, they successfully broke into the school and find creepy files on Nathan, and even evidence of a possible alliance between Nathan and David, but we aren't just done yet. I mean, it's not every day that you get to be in a school by yourself, right? So why not take advantage of it? So, what do you think they're gonna do? Is it A, trash the principal's office, B, do their homework, or C, break into the pool and have a romantic and aesthetically pleasing date? The answer is B, do their homework. This is one of the rare moments of calming peace that we get in the game, and it serves as a nice break, especially with all of the upcoming world-altering chaos of Episode 4 and especially Episode 5. The pool room itself is dimly lit, save for the warm light coming from the pool itself, which creates a calming and intimate moment for the both of them. They bond some more over their memories, splash each other with that wonderfully radioactive bleached school water, and just float around.
Why look, an otter in my water.
By now though, you should know the drill. We can't let our characters enjoy a peaceful alone time without getting rudely interrupted. A couple of school guards, including David, find out that, I don't know, through a magical sixth sense or something, that someone broke in, and Max and Chloe have to maneuver their way out of the pool through the girls' locker room. It's actually incredibly easy to hide from the guards. You literally just have to crouch down by a dirty stall and wait for them to pass. I mean, even by my standards, I play games like often, but I suck at them, but it was still incredibly easy for me to hide from them. It really just shows how terrible they are at their jobs. The next day, Max wakes up next to Chloe in her room. The scene that plays next shows us just how comfortable they've gotten with each other. Chloe even lets Max borrow some of Rachel's old clothes since hers are soaked in nasty chlorine. This was obviously not an easy decision for Chloe to make. Rachel meant the world to her, but allowing Max to wear something that belonged to her is kind of like an ultimate act of trust. You also get the option to give her a little smooch, which is a chance that I took with zero hesitation because of course I am a Max and Chloe stan.
Damn.
Max goes downstairs and talks to the lovely Joyce once more, who makes us pancakes, and I can't help but admire her cooking skills. Do you know how hard it is to make pancakes? This is also when Joyce hands Max a Polaroid photo of Chloe and her dad that was taken right before the accident happened. And it's actually kind of sad because Joyce knows that this is the last time she ever saw her daughter be genuinely, truly happy. Back to the actual plot of the game though, we need to break into David's computer since it has a lot of information on Blackwell students, and we suspect that he might be involved in something sinister, especially as they further their investigation on the disappearance of Rachel Amber. Although it kinda sucks how the only way we can get into the garage unnoticed is to distract Joyce by having Chloe argue with her. I don't know, I feel bad for Joyce, she just can't catch a break. After some more snooping and puzzles, I hate puzzles, we eventually do get into his computer by figuring out his password. David has an alarming amount of files on so many Blackwell students. We go back into the kitchen with our info just in time for David himself to arrive and start complaining about 2 students who broke into the pool last night. It's pretty obvious that he's suggesting that they did it, which they most certainly did, but it's mostly just pointing fingers and accusations. All of this eventually leads to a full-on fight with the entire family about his obsessive and paranoid behavior, which only gets worse when Chloe comes out with the information about the security cameras that David has implanted in the house. This is a fact that's kind of brushed over though, and it's only mentioned like twice in the game, even though it's really creepy and a huge invasion of privacy. I mean, I honestly don't really think that David meant any harm with them. He's just really paranoid, and ultimately, I'm pretty sure his intentions were only to protect his family, but like, it's still kind of creepy. You get another choice here to either defend Chloe or David, and obviously I chose to defend Chloe. I don't really know why you would defend David, but because of this, Joyce actually tells David to leave. She kicks him out.
Oh, you're turning on me now, huh? Of course. Women always stick together.
So after breaking up a family, Max and Chloe figured out that they need to break into Frank's RV and get more info on Rachel. Frank's RV is parked outside of the diner, and it's locked of course, so we head inside to find him eating a nice plate of morning beans. You go girl, get that daily dose of protein. Also, this is like the moment where Frank delivers the best line in the entire franchise.
You eat like a pig. Try the floor.
I was eating those beans. Are you fucking insane? I was eating those beans!
God, I love this game so much. Unfortunately though, that cinematic masterpiece of a scene doesn't actually work in our favor, and we have to rewind to take a much calmer approach by getting more information on him before trying to talk to him. Max talks to a few other people in the diner, including a local police officer who ends up accidentally confessing to something. He says that the Prescott family did him a favor in the past, and in return he promised to keep an eye out for their son. So basically, Nathan is just above the law at this point. Speaking of Nathan, he's also eating at one of the booths, and he's not very happy to see Max. At the beginning of episode 1, when he tries to beat up Max, she actually scratches him on the cheek in defense, and you still see some of the marks on his face. Even though he's really reluctant to actually speak to her, we do get some insight on how Rachel and Frank had a really close relationship, and that Frank always carries a photo of Rachel around with him. This only raises more questions about Rachel and her disappearance, because now we know that Frank could possibly be involved, but it also brings up another question, if she was only using Frank to get her goal of leaving Arcadia Bay. On the other hand, maybe she was using Chloe and truly only wanted to be with Frank. Something we sadly don't really get an answer to. Using what we learned about Frank and Rachel's close relationship, we can now approach Frank in a more sympathetic way, and we ask him to see the photo. He's surprisingly calm and lets go of his previous hostile aggression and takes out the photo in his pocket, along with his keys. This is when Max pulls another one of her tricks and snatches the keys and rewinds to before they ever interacted. It's, again, very confusing, but kinda cool. They walk over to his RV, which is being guarded by his stinky little dog, which is named Pompidou, by the way. You have to get rid of him in one way or another, and you have 2 options. You either throw a dog bone a few feet away, or throw the dog bone directly into traffic. So with Pompidou now happily chomping on his food like the serious guard dog that he is, we step inside his RV, and an RV that I can smell from my screen. It probably stinks like aged cheese and crusted Hot Pockets, but then again, so does my room, so I guess I can't really judge him for that. Inside, we find many pictures of Rachel, and we can get the sense that this was someone that he really cared about, and from what we can see, it went both ways. There's even a letter addressed to Frank from Rachel, and in this letter, she speaks to him very caringly, suggesting that they had a full-on relationship going on under everyone's noses, specifically under Chloe's nose. This really upsets Chloe, and I can see why. The person who she cared for, someone she fell in love with and who meant the absolute world to her, someone that she has single-handedly dedicated the past few months of her life to finding, was secretly with someone else the entire time. Not only that, but I think this is the moment where the possibility of Rachel having just used Chloe for her own personal gain becomes a real concern for her. I feel like Chloe's always suspected this deep down, but this only solidified her worries and turns them from a simple concern to real possibilities. This information cuts their expedition short, and Chloe drops Max off a Blackwell without another word. Okay, also, I know that I said that the picture was of Chloe and her dad, but I'm actually wrong. It was of Max and Chloe, but I'm too lazy to go back and, like, re-record that. So back in her room, Max looks at the photo of her and Chloe taken before her life fell apart. Back when everything was fine and things still made sense, and when she wasn't forced to navigate the world with a confusing power. Most importantly though, it was when they were still friends. She starts reminiscing on the memories and staring at the Polaroid when something really weird happens.
Oh my god.
If you thought Max's rewind powers were already confusing enough, then it's about to get 10 times worse. She figures out that by staring at the photo hard enough, she is able to see the memory itself. She can see the images moving and even hear them, and ultimately, she can travel to the exact moment in time when the photo was taken. As I mentioned before, this photo was taken shortly before Chloe's dad got into an accident, and now that she went back in time to the exact moment that it happened, she's gonna try and prevent it from ever happening in the first place. Messing with the fabric of time can be incredibly messy, but Max is determined to change the moment that ruined her best friend's life through any means necessary. The following itself is a little bit unsettling and kind of confusing. She's in the body of her younger self, and no one around her has any clue of what's going on, and everything is kind of warped and faded outside of that room. If you look outside of the windows, everything looks really off, and it shows a white and blurry background, similar to what a developing film would look like. You see Chloe's dad being very much alive, and this whole section just feels like a messed up dream instead of an actual moment in time. It's also the only time that we get to see Chloe interact with her father. They're happy, truly happy, and we get to see the hole that he left in his family with his passing. Max goes through a bit of trial and error to try to stop him from leaving, or at least she would have, but I guess I actually kind of got lucky in my first playthrough and I just kind of tossed the keys outside to prevent him from leaving, and this seemed to work. So he gives up on trying to find his keys, and Max convinces him to take the bus instead, and as the memory starts to fade, she hugs Chloe and waits to wake up once more in a new reality. Ideally, this should be the end of every major conflict. Chloe has her dad back, their friendship never ended so abruptly and bitterly, and they were both able to live their best lives. Except it's not actually as simple as that. In this new reality, Max has somehow ended up as the leader of the Vortex Club. She's friends with Victoria, who seems to be really eager to be her bestie. Her relationship with her parents, as we see, has worsened compared to last time, and through their texts, we get to see the kind of person that Max has become, a cruel, irresponsible character. And even Alyssa doesn't like her now, and if Alyssa doesn't like you, then that's major bad news. But she doesn't really care about that when she's got bigger issues like checking up on her favorite blue-haired girl to see how she's doing. In this new version of life, everything should have worked out perfectly for her. Despite her best intentions though, that's not what happened. Episode 4 is simply titled Dark Room. Even though Max tried to change her friend's life for the better, she only ended up making things worse. The smallest changes in the past, no matter how noble they have been, have had major consequences. Get it? Like the butterfly effect? It's sad when you realize that in every other reality, Chloe is unable to get away from tragedies. Instead of the cool blue-haired emo that we've gotten so used to, we now have this hopeless version of her who seems to have given up all hope. So you might be wondering what happened to Chloe, and she does go on to explain the situation. Basically, she was gifted a car for her birthday, and she got into an accident, which resulted in her being bound to a wheelchair. The next few parts of this section are spent with Max staying in Chloe's room, which is now the garage, and we see what her life is like in this different, universe. Yes, her parents are alive and well, and they truly do seem like a happy family, but they're also drowning in debt because of all of Chloe's medical expenses. And after looking around for a bit, we discover that her condition isn't getting any better, and at this point she's just kind of waiting for her time to end. It just really sucks because in one life, Chloe's family has broken apart and she's become an angry, bitter person as a result, but in another one, she got the family she always wanted, but at the cost of her life, as we soon see. After their little reunion, Chloe asks Max for a very heavy favor.
Listen, Max. My respiratory system is failing. I want this time with you to be my last memory. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Like I've said before, I've watched gameplay of this, game a couple times, but this was still a hard decision to make. From what we learn, she's not getting any better, and at this point she's just waiting for her time to come. She's in pain and she's not getting anything out of her situation, and she just feels stranded. She even compares herself to one of the beached whales that we actually see in Arcadia Bay. Again, another strange weather occurrence. It's a difficult choice, but I decided to go ahead and fulfill Chloe's wish. The only thing really left for her to do now is just go back in time through the photo once more, and this time allow Chloe's dad to get into the accident. I know she isn't the one physically doing it. I mean, Max isn't, pushing her dad in front of a car, but she still can't help but feel guilty for allowing her best friend's dad to die, even if it is for the best. After this heartbreaking section, Max wakes up in her previous reality, the one before any of this confusing photo timeline jumping happened. A bit of time has passed because, I don't know, time-space rules. So Max is a bit confused, but she quickly catches up on what's happening, and she does leave out the whole part about her going back in time.
Chloe, you're alive. Yes. Whoa, whoa, down, Max. You get one kiss, now you're all over me?
I'm so glad you're here.
Dude, I am, like, so emotionally attached to these two, it's not even funny anymore. So the next thing on their mission is to break into Nathan's room to see if they can dig up any dirt regarding Rachel. Or just anything at this point. I mean, what hasn't this guy done yet? Other than be a good person, I guess. We actually do get to visit Kate in the hospital really quickly before this quest, and it's nice to see that she's finally improving. She looks a lot happier than any of the times we've seen her previously, and she looks to be full of energy, even telling us excitedly about the children's book she's working on. After their brief visit, they head to the boys' dorm room, and Max decides to sneak into his room while Chloe keeps watch. And his room is pretty creepy. It's dark, similar to Kate's, but unlike hers, it's not depressing, it's just kind of disturbing. There are a lot of black and white images that just give off an eerie mood, along with an unsettling music in the background. We also get to see a little framed award that was given to Nathan by his dad. Nathan doesn't have the best relationship with his dad, and we get clues about this as the game goes on, especially in this room, and especially when you read through his emails and messages with him. His dad basically thinks that he's a screw-up and brings shame to the Prescott name. Pretty intense stuff, so when I saw this little award sitting on Nathan's wall, it just kinda hurt. It's an award that must have been given to him by his father when he was younger and likely before he became the disappointment of his family. He's still clinging onto this along with the hope that he'll one day get his father's approval. His relationship with his family does give us an insight as to why he acts the way that he does. It's not an excuse, but it at least lets us see the sort of environment that he grew up in that made it easy for him to become a jerk. As we see in this room, he has a couple of mental issues, like anger issues, and he wasn't getting any support for this or any real help, and he turned to buying to Frank as his only solution to his problems. We actually end up finding a burner phone taped behind the sofa with mysterious claw marks underneath. After this, Max and Chloe start to make their way out of the boys' dorm room when they run into him. For some reason, he quickly suspects that they were snooping around in his room, and he's still very angry at Max for existing, I guess, so he once again tries to beat her up. And that's when our favorite simp comes in and takes the hit for her. Not only that, but he actually full-on starts beating the dude up without even hesitating. Get off me, bro! We get another choice here. We can either interfere and stop Warren from punching him, or just sit back and let it happen. And, okay, I know I've been trash-talking Nathan for like the past 20 minutes, but I actually chose to stop the fight. I know, it's very hypocritical of me, but I've seen the clip where you do let him get beaten up. And it's, I don't know, I mean, I don't feel like he deserves it. Yes, he's a pain, but at the end of the day, even he's going through his own struggles. He shouldn't be taking them out on other people, but why force someone to go to an even lower point than what they already are in? Alright, so to further their Rachel investigation and to find out how she's connected with Nathan and possibly even David, Max and Chloe head over to Frank once more. You have to try to convince him to trust you this time. Now, you would think that since back in, what was it, like episode 2 or something, that I chose not to shoot him, he would be more willing to give us information, and that whole midi quest would be easy, right? No, you're absolutely wrong. This part was way too difficult for me to even get through. Like, I'm not even kidding, I'm looking at the recording of the gameplay, and it took me around 15 minutes of non-stop trial and error until I just finally gave up and looked up a tutorial. I got so tired of listening to Frank say the same insults over and over again, especially since he kept repeating the word yeah so many times.
Yeah.
So after the painstaking amount of hard work and choosing our words carefully that it took me, Frank decides to, trust the player, and he gives us a list of his clients in hopes that this will help us find out what happened to Rachel. Now, that whole mini quest was annoying enough for my tiny brain to figure out, so this next one was just agonizing. Again, puzzles are really not my strong suit. I think I tried solving it for like the first few minutes, but then I just ran straight to YouTube because, I needed a tutorial. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this video, you can forget all the points, they're probably not as important. The main point of this video is just, there is no shame in using YouTube tutorials, okay? They carried my gameplay. But basically, you have to go all detective mode on the supportive evidence and piece together every single bit of information until you find the right connections, and the difficulty increases with each puzzle. From this, they managed to find a location to an old farm that the Prescotts used to own. Using this, they just had to go into it and try to figure out how this connects with everything. They head over to the farm and the location, and after breaking and entering, they find a steel door on the floor of the barn hidden away underneath a stack of hay. Of course, they have to figure out how to break it open in the first place. Alright, so they made their way inside the old Prescott barn, and thanks to the YouTube tutorial, they type in the correct log and they enter the bunker. The bunker is your typical farm bunker. We all have those, right? It has a lot of boxes and materials at the entrance, and it costs just a little over my entire college tuition.
That son of a bitch.
And as you look around, you start realizing that it's not just your typical apocalypse bunker. It has things that are incredibly out of place. like expensive photography equipment like a giant printer and a bunch of disturbing black and white photographs that we can only assume were taken by the same person using this place. There's even duct tape on one of the sinks, and as you go further in, you see what looks to be an area for photo shoots equipped with background and giant cameras, as well as big lights. Unfortunately, things only get worse from here. They turn on the computer and find photos of Kate taken at this exact spot, and if you remember at the end of episode 1, we saw a glimpse of some red binders containing people's names which included Rachel and Kate, and now there's a new edition of an empty binder labeled Victoria. All of the files inside of the red binder originated from this room, and all of them contain similar photos of subjects looking half awake. It's a little disturbing, and you can't help but wonder just what kind of person would set up an entire room just to take photos of other people without them knowing. We still don't really know the full picture behind this room, but we do finally get an explanation for what happened to Rachel. Chloe is incredibly distraught when she goes through Rachel's file and is in denial of the whole situation.
Max, we have to find that spot now. Then we can see what he did. There's no way she's dead. No way. She posed for those pictures, Max. I know it. Please, let's go.
She actually recognizes one of the locations in an image in the Rachel file, the junkyard that they always hung out at, and desperately they make their way out of the bunker to the location to see if they can find any last piece of evidence or even something that could lead them to Rachel. But we know, and Chloe knows too, that at this point it's far too late to save her. Despite the heavy subject and the nature of the scene, I just want to quickly say that I felt like it was done amazingly. The pacing of the music and the instruments, the rush of the characters gave you a sense of desperation and dread. It makes you feel like you're right there with the characters, speeding down the streets and rushing in to find out the truth. The guitar picks up with a sad riff as they finally realize what happened to Rachel. Chloe's friend, the person she loved the most in the world, was buried in the junkyard. As the camera pans out, we see the deer one more time watching them from a distance before it finally fades away entirely. Chloe's voice actress did an amazing job in this section. I mean, she made the scene what it was. I just wanted to quickly point that out before moving on. With Rachel's whereabouts finally being discovered, the only thing they really have to do now was catch Nathan for the crime. There's a Vortex Club party being held that night, and they figure that that's where they'd most likely find him. Even though the biggest mystery in the game was solved, it doesn't take away from another one, Max's effect on reality due to the use of her powers. We've seen through the game that weird things have happened because of this, like snow in 80-degree weather, a random eclipse, beached whales, but all of this is amplified when outside of the party they see a double moon. Everyone at the party is too drunk to notice though, so it's not really a big deal. Also, it's heavily implied, it's not even implied, it's like probably fully stated that Chloe is planning on like murdering Nathan, which... Anyway, a drunk Warren stops the both of them and Chloe gets pretty annoyed since she's on a manhunt, and she leaves on her own while Warren takes a quick Polaroid with Max. This photo ends up being kind of important, so keep it at the back of your stinky little mind, please. Max does go into the party eventually, and I just love how the atmosphere completely changes once you enter it. You go from a somber and heavy mood to a celebratory and almost chaotic one as you're thrown into the middle of a party which has been appropriately named End of the World Party. The lighting is dark and red, which gives off a distant sense of impending doom, and even the water looks scary with its dark red dye. There's also a little party light going around and it's shaped like a tornado, similar to the one that's set on destroying Arcadia Bay in just a couple of hours. The party feels very chaotic and out of control as it messes with your senses, a great precursor to the chaos of the upcoming episode. We walk around a bit and actually find Victoria, and we're given the option to warn her about Nathan and his plans to kidnap her.
Sorry, Max. Vortex Club members only. Go fuck yourself, Victoria.
She actually doesn't believe Max at first, even claiming that he would never do that to her. Regardless, she thanks her for the warning. They don't end up finding him at the party, but Chloe does receive a text from Nathan threatening them that the evidence they found for Rachel at the junkyard is going to disappear, so they just had to head over there before that can happen.
Stop stomping around, Chloe.
There's still a lot left to uncover about this town, like who was behind the dark room and how everything in Arcadia Bay is connected. The game has relied on these questions to drive the plot on the story, and after everything that these characters have been through, we finally get our answers.
Oh, no. Chloe! Look how...
With Chloe out of the way now and Mr. Jefferson being revealed as the one behind everything, the screen fades out, and with that we start the final episode. The final episode is called Polarized, and it starts off with Max finding herself strapped to a chair in front of a camera and a bright white light. Max is in the darkroom once again. More specifically, she's its newest victim. Next to her is an unconscious Victoria who doesn't seem to be waking up no matter how many times she calls out to her.
Victoria!
Even though she wants to escape, she's pretty groggy and out of it, and she eventually sees a photo of herself that looks like it was taken a couple of hours prior to where she is right now. And in that one, she looks a lot more awake, so with the little crumb of consciousness that she has left, she travels through the photo and back in time. Okay, so this next part gets kinda confusing. In fact, the entirety of this episode is enough to make my head hurt, but these next few minutes involve a lot of back and forth time jumping and all of that, so for the sake of time, I'm gonna try to briefly sum those parts up as best as I can so that we can get to the real meat and potatoes of this episode. So this time when Max wakes up, she's in front of Mr. Jefferson, who is snapping photos of her and just being insanely unhinged.
Hold that stare there! Stay still!
This guy pulls a complete 180 on us and is revealed to be the secret villain behind all of this. He goes on to explain in a detailed monologue while poor Max is forced to listen to him.
Why are you doing this?
Oh, Max. I'm so glad you asked that question. Simply put, I'm obsessed with the idea of capturing that.
Pretty much all of his award-winning art and fame wasn't enough for him. I guess the man got bored after taking so many black and white photos that he decided that his true passion was, according to him,
capturing that moment. Innocence evolves into corruption.
A little pretentious if you ask me, but go off, I guess. So once he enrolled as a Blackwell teacher, he quickly took note of Nathan's crippling daddy issues and took this as an opportunity to sort of take him under his wing and become like a fake father figure for him. Of course, he was only using him for his family's money so that he could use their bunker as his own personal studio, which is even more messed up. I'm not actually sure if the bunker existed prior to this and they just like allowed him to make it his own, or if they just straight up built a new one because he asked them to. Either way, it's a pretty evil thing to do. And the Prescotts were fully to blame for this. I mean, they definitely knew what was going on. I kind of wish, though, that we got more of a clarification on the role that the Prescotts played in the whole plot. I mean, we know that they built it and they funded the little bunker, but it's kind of hard to believe that they just like handed over the money because some guy offered to babysit their son. I would understand if maybe there was like some blackmail going on, but it's pretty vague for the most part, unless I just missed something. Anyway, Mr. Jefferson started his weird side hobby by sedating? He would make his victims EP before taking them to this room, where he would take photos of them in a half-awake state so he could capture their fleeting innocence and hope. Because of the sedative though, none of the people he took in were able to remember what happened. This connects to what Kate was saying about not being able to remember the night that the video was filmed, except for a bright white light, which we now know is the studio light. By the way, he wasn't the one who dosed Kate or anything, it was actually Nathan. According to Mr. Black and White Snapchat filter, Nathan tried doing the same with Rachel, but he messed up on administering the medicine, or the sedative, whatever it's called, because bro doesn't know how to do fractions, and he ended up overdoing it, which resulted in her dying. Jefferson was planning on doing this to both Max and Victoria, soon after he was done with Kate's photo shoot, which is just so messed up on so many levels. Because keep in mind, this guy put on a warm and welcoming facade to all of his students. He encouraged his students, especially the most vulnerable like Max, to create a false sense of trust, also that he would be able to pick them off more easily. It's really sick and twisted, but it was his plan. With his explanation out of the way, it's time for some confusing time jumping. So again, I'm gonna start to summarize here because it gets really repetitive and really confusing, so bear with me and hopefully I don't lose you too much in this. Max's attempt at getting out by jumping through the photo doesn't really get her anywhere except for a long drawn out monologue, and she wakes up again right back where she was in the dark room. This time though, she spots the selfie that she took of herself all the way back in the first episode. So she goes through that one and we travel all the way back to the beginning of the week, before she met Chloe and before any of this went down. So now she's back in the class once again, and it's kind of cool to see how she's a complete contrast to how she was the first time when we saw her in the scene. When we first played her in the scene, she lacked a lot of confidence. Now though, she's the complete opposite. She talks back to her teacher at every chance that she gets, making remarks about his upcoming fate. It's just kind of cool to see how she went from seeking the approval of those she looked up to defying their every move. This time, after she goes back to the new present, she reports her teacher and Nathan to the police, and we see through these memories that they've been arrested and Rachel's case has come to a close. We also learned that in this new version of events, Max submitted her photo into the photography competition, and she actually ended up winning it too. So because of this, when she wakes up again, she's on a plane with Principal Wells flying to New York where her photo is being shown at a gallery. She gets the opportunity to walk around a little bit and look at all of the art, as well as hers being admired by so many other people. And this is when she gets a call from Chloe.
Holy shit, man, your vision! It's true! You saw the tornado, it's coming!
What?
The phone call is very distorted, and she tells Max that the storm from her vision has hit Arcadia. Before she can get any more information, the call cuts entirely. She starts freaking out that her beloved Chloe is all alone in Arcadia when the storm hits, and she's now determined to go back in time again so that she can be with her when it happens. How does she do it, you might ask? She goes back in time to when she took the photo that won her the competition and rips it up.
No! I'm back here again?
Yeah, so she wakes up in the dark room again. I feel bad for her, you know, like she had good intentions, but I will admit it's kind of sweet how Max is so willing to give up everything just so she can keep her friend safe. Really stupid, but sweet nonetheless. So again, it's basically like we just went back and undid all of our hard work. Chloe was once again shot by Jefferson. Victoria was also eliminated, and it's revealed that he actually also killed Nathan much earlier in the episode. So the message that Chloe supposedly received from him, which lured them out in the first place, was actually written and sent by the teacher. In the background, we can also hear loud banging and heavy wind sounds, so the storm is already well on its way.
Whoa. Did you see how crazy it is outside?
Since she knows the truth about everything now, he's pretty much left with no other option but to bonk her as well. He approaches Max with a needle, promising her a peaceful death, when we hear even more banging coming from upstairs. Except this time it's not the wind, it's a person. Alright, place your bets. Who do you think is gonna come up around that corner? Is it Chloe? Warren? Rachel even?
Jefferson, it's over!
Oh, it's Rice.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna hate on David. He's in the middle of rescuing her. We finally get to learn David's involvement in the whole story. Surprisingly, despite being the game's biggest red herring, he was never actually the villain. In fact, he was kind of actively on Max and Chloe's side. From what I was able to understand at least, he was sort of running his own investigation to figure out what was going on in Arcadia along with the disappearances. Like I said before, David's intentions were only ever to protect his family. He took extreme measures to reach this goal, and he ended up harming his relationships along the line. Again, sort of my fault, oopsies I guess, but in all honesty, he's not a horrible person. He's far from being an irredeemable monster at least. He's just a broken person who's trying his best to fix himself for his family. He loves Joyce, and even though he and Chloe don't get along, he really does care about her as well. This becomes even more apparent if you choose to tell him the truth, that Chloe was killed by the same person he just knocked out. He's immediately distraught by this news, and seeing him break down over the fact that he'll no longer have the chance to fix their relationship is heartbreaking. Kinda makes me feel a little bit bad for breaking up his marriage. With the police on their way to the bunker thanks to David, Max leaves the barn and begins to drive to the diner. Back in episode 4, Warren took a photo of him and Max outside of the party. See? Told you it would be important. So she figures that she can use this photo to go back and save Chloe. That is assuming that Warren is still alive. While she starts driving down the road, she starts to listen to a last voice message from Nathan, which was taken before Jefferson got rid of him as well.
Max, it's Nathan. I just want to say, I'm sorry.
In this version of events, it's already far too late to save him. And I don't know, maybe I'm just like a weenie or something, but hearing Nathan break down on the phone, probably well aware of what was going to happen to him, made me just a little sad. He did terrible things throughout the game. He was unstable and harmed so many people around him. I mean, the dude tried choking Max, but at the same time, he's also just a teenager. He was abandoned by his dad the second he showed any signs of having any mental health issues, and he was quickly deemed as the greatest disappointment in his entire family lineage. I mean, the guy had to rely on a psychopath as a father figure. He wasn't getting any proper support. It's also just really sad to imagine what he must have felt like when he learned that the person he thought he could trust, the one person who would be on his side, was just using him the entire time. At the moment that he started recording this voice message for her, he realized that he was just a pawn in a bigger game orchestrated by someone else, and these were his last moments. Just to clarify, again, I do a lot of clarifications here, but I'm not excusing what he did, by the way. He did horrible things, and simply having daddy issues isn't going to make his actions vanish, but I just couldn't help but feel a little bit of sympathy when I heard this. Once she makes it to the Bay Area, we quickly see that this section of town has been hit the hardest, and it's the closest to the actual tornado. We see entire buildings that have been there for years fall to the ground, even small fires caused by torn electrical wires. Oh, that kind of rhymed. Anyway, countless cars have either crashed or been abandoned on the roads, and it's created multiple obstacles for Max, as well as opportunities to help some Arcadia Bay residents. There are a few background characters here that you can save by using her rewind power, like this truck driver who's stuck under some rubble, and this Blackwell student who thinks that taking pretty photos in the middle of a deadly hurricane is a good idea. But who cares about all those NPCs when you have someone more important to save? Alyssa! She somehow got stuck on the second floor of a building, and me being the #1 Alyssa stan, I was determined to save her. Inside the diner, we see a lot of previous characters, all of which have been affected by the storm and ultimately Max's power. We see the one and only Joyce, helping out Frank and his dog. And we also see a lonely, sad Warren. He's as helpful as he is loyal, not even questioning or doubting Max when she opens up to him about her powers. He hands over the Polaroid without a moment of hesitation, and before we go back in time once again, we get another important choice. We can either give him a little thank you smooch or a goodbye hug. In hindsight, I probably should have just given the man a thank you hug, but I was emotional and sad and also incredibly sleep deprived, so I chose to give him a little smooch. Finally, Max focuses on the picture and we're brought back to the night of the end of the world party. And I just feel really bad for Max. I mean, this girl has been through like 20 different timelines at this point, and it's only going to get much more worse for her from here on out. Chloe has full-on tunnel vision at this point once again, and the only thing she can focus on is getting back at Nathan for what he did to Rachel. She doesn't stop to listen to what Max is saying until she reveals what happened when she tried to keep her father alive. This is enough to get through to her, and she realizes that her best friend is the coolest person in the world, and she reassures Max that she did the right thing by allowing Chloe to live. Hopefully you're still with me at this point and things haven't gotten too confusing, but now, when she wakes up again, she's in the new present, or permanent present, I guess. In this version, Chloe and Victoria are both alive, and Jefferson has been arrested. Even though they finally solved and fixed the biggest mystery in their town, it hasn't been enough to stop the storm. They're both making their way up to the lighthouse now to get away from all the chaos. Apparently though, all the time jumping and universe altering has proven to be too much for her body and mind, and she ends up passing out once more.
What? Chloe... I've got your back, Max.
Okay, this is the point where things get really confusing. It's also the point where we're finally nearing the end of the story, as well as the final major decision. What happens next, I can't really begin to wrap my head around, honestly. And it's also really easy to get lost, so stay with me for a second again. So Max wakes up from her extended nap, but instead of being at the lighthouse, she finds herself at the very start of the game. It's the beginning of the week once again, and she's back in her photography class. Everything seems to be playing in the exact shot-for-shot replay of the beginning of the game, except for the random swarm of birds that start slamming themselves directly into the window. Oh, and then in the second shot, everyone just seemingly disappears, except for Max. Nothing about the situation makes sense. It almost feels like a bad dream fueled by Max's fears and insecurities. If you look around the room, the places where Jefferson's published photos once were are still there, but the models are replaced by Max. Every single one. The ones on the walls, the ones on computers, everything. There are even these disturbing words carved all over Kate's desk, and a creepy photo of Max and Chloe when they found out what happened to Rachel. The only thing that hasn't been left unchanged in the room is the words Rachel Amber Forever that was carved on the desk, likely because her mystery has finally come to a close. So my best guess is that this nightmare-like sequence that follows is just a nightmare. A way for Max's guilt that she has built up through the game to manifest itself and torment her mind. The burden of managing a power she doesn't know how to use, the consequences of altering so many different realities, the shame that ultimately came from allowing her best friend's dad to get into an accident, and even having to unplug her friend in that alternate timeline. All of these things have been eating away at her, and her body got overwhelmed with the use of her powers, so she passed out and experienced a nightmare. On the other hand, it could just be that she's literally just going through many alternate realities and timelines while she's out of it, but I'm not really sure if that's the best explanation that makes sense to me, at least. There's a lot about this game that isn't really explained, and it's mostly just left for us to interpret, which is great for the sake of conversation, but very confusing. Max goes to leave the empty classroom, but right as she's turning the doorknob, she's stopped by crusty, dusty, rusty Mr. Jefferson, who decides to materialize into the room. They start to talk, but it quickly becomes obvious that something is wrong, since the only dialogue options are things that Max would never say.
I just wanted to know if you'd like to spend the rest of your life in my darkroom.
Forgetting that horrendous interaction, she finally opens the hallway door but finds herself in the hallway of her dorm room. This area is a bit different than the usual layout, with candles every couple of feet, likely put there for Kate. And speaking of Kate, she's the only person in the hallway aside from Max. We see her lighting up a candle outside of her dorm room, and we approach her. Without even a second of hesitation, she starts hating on Max for saving her life. I'm guessing this scene right here was mostly just made to play for the people who were unable to save her, since that interaction is much more aggressive and much more emotional.
Max, why did you stop me from jumping? What kind of friend are you? Max, how could you let me jump off a roof? You were the only person I trusted here, but you never really listened to me.
This part of the game mostly consists of a lot of trial and error. You have to open multiple doors in hopes of finding the right one that'll take you to the end of the sequence. There are clues that you can use to find the right doors, but for the sake of time and for my sanity, I went ahead and looked up a guide. Despite the fact that I was using a guide and I knew what I was doing, I still felt incredibly uncomfortable when I played this part. This section does an excellent job of making you feel claustrophobic, suffocated, and trapped. There's no background music at all as you make your way through the doors, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can start to get very desperate very fast. You feel like you're walking around in an endless maze, and the low lighting coupled with the fact that you're all alone without a single background noise only elevates the desperation that you may start to feel. Once I had Max go through the proper door though, the scene changes again. You're still in the hallway, but this time there are hundreds of missing person posters plastered all over the walls and strewn across the floor. Even Max herself is now in Rachel's clothes, and we can sort of start to get the idea that we're seeing these halls in the perspective of Jefferson's victims. It's interesting to see how the decor changes when we play as Rachel, and I'm assuming that this is what the dorm looked like when Rachel attended Blackwell. We eventually go through the door, which I'm assuming used to be her dorm room, and once again the hall changes. Except this time we turn into Victoria. The posters disappear and are instead replaced by writing on the wall. We see a couple of quotes from Victoria, as well as encouraging phrases like Victoria rules and also some not so nice phrases. It's interesting because if we're to assume that this is from the perspective of the victims, then this would be how Victoria sees herself. She tries covering up the insults and jabs by surrounding herself with a toxic sense of self-positivity and compliments. But even after all of this, there are still insults and a lot of negativity in her mind. How she truly feels about herself under the confident, unbothered persona that she uses to an extreme to hide her insecurities. We go through another door, this time the last door, and we go back to the lovely Max in a hallway that's modeled after her. The walls have a lot of photo collages and Polaroids to represent her love of photography. And there are also these giant squirrels outside, which jump scared me when I first saw them. You can actually take a photo of them and it goes into your inventory, which again is just super confusing if you're trying to figure out if this is a dream or something that's actually happening. She goes through her dorm room, I'm assuming, and finally goes into the hallway outside of the classroom, although it's still very far from normal. The scene plays similarly to how it did at the beginning of the game where Max puts in her headphones, except every student and every word that comes out of their mouths, even the music and the writing on the walls, is reversed and mirrored. We see the ghostier once again, who leads her inside of the bathroom and onto... I did not enjoy this part. I mean, aesthetically, it was really cool, don't get me wrong, but I swear I had 20 different heart attacks trying to get through this part. So this room right here, if you can even call it a room, has an obstacle course of sorts. It's a maze full of multiple Mr. Jeffersons who are going around with flashlights looking for Max, all while saying these unhinged and borderline creepy things.
Don't try to hide, Max! Get over here! Let me capture you!
And I have to give credit to Jefferson's voice actor, he has range. For most of the game, he has a very calming, at times smooth and even charming voice. He gives off the vibe of a young, helpful mentor at the start. In the dark room though, this completely changes. He still has that smooth voice, but he can quickly switch away from it, becoming fully unhinged. And the same goes for this part of the game. He'll go from kindly encouraging Max to lure her to him, to full-on intimidation. This sequence reflects how he went about getting his subjects. He would find vulnerable students, usually those with low self-esteem like Max and Kate, or people who went to him for guidance like Victoria, and people who were in need of help like Rachel. He would take them in and make them feel welcome, before revealing his true intentions. Having just come out of a nightmarish, claustrophobic puzzle, I was already on the verge of having a heart attack, so being put into this maze just amplified the fear that I was already feeling. It also didn't help that I kept getting caught by Mr. Jefferson while he proceeded to scream at me. Something interesting that I noticed, which I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but at first when you get caught by his flashlight, he just calls out to you in a friendly manner, sometimes even sounding like he's faking concern.
Hey, Max?
As you continue to get caught though, he starts getting desperate and begins screaming.
Now...
Oh, Max!
Also, there's this one specific line that Jefferson says, and I swear you can hear his voice actor laughing when he says it because it's just so ridiculous.
The only place I can be myselfie is in the dark room.
Look, I never said the dialogue was perfect, but you have to admit that that was an amazing pun. After an agonizing couple of minutes of getting caught around 6 times, I got to the second part of the maze. These next few parts are shorter and easier to get through. The first one has you hide behind this eerie black and white photo thing while you avoid being hit by a light coming from a statue shaped like Principal Wells. After this, you go through another mini maze full of lockers, and this time there's also Frank, Warren, and David, along with the principal who also have flashlights. So from what I gathered in this area, she's being chased and searched for by the people who pose threats to her. Her teacher is a clear example, he tried to kill her as well as her friend. Even though we do end up sort of befriending Frank and learning that he's not as bad as he seems, I mean, he has a dog, could anyone with a dog really be evil? He's still a scary obstacle at first for both of them, so it makes sense as to why he's here. He did threaten to harm them multiple times. David, even after his redemption, was after them as well at first, and Principal Wells wasn't really dangerous or anything by himself, but he chose not to believe Max, and ultimately, it ended up putting her in danger. All of these things make sense. All these people posed a threat to her. So that's why it confuses me that Warren is also a part of this. I don't know how to feel about it, and it's kind of unsettling. As far as I know, Warren was never out to hurt any of the characters, but seeing him in this part made me do like a double take. I'm not sure if it's implying that he did do something wrong or not, or if they just added him here for the sake of filling space. Or maybe they just put him in here because he did technically stand in the way of Max and Chloe's relationship, since he was also interested in Max? Or who knows, maybe they just needed a third character to chase after Max. Around 8 minutes later, I finally made it through that thing and closer to a lighthouse. Of course, this game isn't going to give her a break because it hates her, so this bench teleports her into another scene. She's forced to watch Chloe and her dad's last moments of interaction, and this shows us that she still feels a lot of shame over letting him drive off, even though it really wasn't her fault. Well, that was kind of rude, wasn't it? She's again teleported to another dirty bathroom, and you have to get out of it by typing in a code in the bathroom's lock, even though there are hundreds of numbers written all over the room. The door takes you to the diner once more, and this time it's full of all the previous NPCs. We see Joyce and David, our Queen Alyssa, Blackwell students, but they're all frozen in place. Despite the fact that they're still, we hear their voices one at a time calling out to Max and shaming her for allowing them to die in the storm.
Honey, I always thought of you like a daughter, and now you're gonna take me away from my family. Why would you do that?
I actually really loved what they did here. All of the NPCs in this game have a backstory. You can find this out if you take the time to chat with them and do a little bit of digging. In this part, you're reminded of all of those side stories. The game wants to let you know that these are each individual characters with their own stories aside from the one that you've been playing. The only person who isn't frozen in time, strangely, is Max herself.
Who are you? Holy shit, are you serial?
She claims to be an alternate Max that was left behind in another timeline or something, and she starts dragging her for using her powers. She calls her selfish for using her rewind for her own gain, and even points out how this all stems from Max's loneliness and inability to make friends.
That was not my fault, you son of a bitch.
Don't you dare talk about our mom that way.
To the game's credit, they are well aware of how reckless Chloe is. The alternate Max even calls her out on this. Max is aware that she's pretty much throwing everything away for one person. And in this part, it's like she's shaming herself for it. Chloe defends her against her own consciousness, and this sends us into a final and emotional part of the dream. Max walks around through still images, snapshots of her time with Chloe. She gets to relive her best and worst moments, and how they were there for each other through all of it. It's like a sweet little trip down memory lane that's comforting at first, until you realize it represents the decision that Max has to make. It shows the split between Arcadia Bay and the one person she loves most in the world. Finally, Max wakes up from her dream at the top of the hill with Chloe. The tornado is still well on its way by now, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. All of the effort that they put into stopping the storm and everything that they went through was for nothing. They weren't able to stop the tragedy that's about to strike Arcadia, and regardless of the selfless reasons that Max used her powers, ultimately it was her messing with the universe that caused this disaster to happen in the first place. The tornado is terrifying. It's bigger than the Bay of Arcadia itself, and it's surrounded by a violent lightning storm. Every single person in Arcadia Bay is going to be hit, and a majority of them, if not all, will not make it out alive. The weight of their choices is beginning to pressure them. At this point, they've tried every method that they can to stop the disaster, and nothing has worked. Every method except for one.
Max. This is the only way. You could use that photo to change everything right back to when you took that picture. All that would take is for me to...
Max never asked to be put in this situation. She didn't wake up one day and decide to hold the fate of the entire universe on her shoulders, and despite this, she handled it in the best way that she could. But now she's being put in an impossible position. She has to choose between saving her best friend, the love of her life, who she has sacrificed her own well-being and sanity for over and over again, or an entire town and every single one of its citizens. Citizens that she has helped and has formed bonds with as well. People with their own individual lives. And Chloe herself was the one who suggested it in the first place. She's the one who's willing to sacrifice herself. Sacrificing Chloe would mean that the entire journey of the game would be pointless. Chloe would be killed by Nathan at the start of the week, meaning that everything that they have worked towards, and especially their newly formed bond, would be completely lost. Chloe would die without ever seeing Max again, and this is made especially worse when you remember how Chloe was at the start of the game. She was this bitter, closed-off, rebellious person who was convinced that the world was against her. She had already lost her father and quickly after her best friend, and when that wasn't enough, Rachel was taken away from her as well without an explanation. She would die utterly alone on the floor of a dirty bathroom. She wouldn't even get to live long enough to find out what happened to the most person important to her. And if you remember from before, she was always afraid that she had abandoned her as well. She would die without knowing just how much Max cares about her. All of her fears would be confirmed. That there is no one left in the world who would be there for her. Even if you don't like Chloe, it's a terrible and sad ending for anyone. Choosing to sacrifice Arcadia Bay, on the other hand, is still a difficult choice. As I've mentioned before, the game does a great job at making their background characters feel like real people, and this only makes your decision feel more personal. You can interact with almost all of them, even ones that aren't even important to the story. There's a fisherman outside of the diner who rants to you about wanting to fish in an area that's been bought by the Prescotts. There's a businesswoman who recently moved to Arcadia who wants to land an important job in the town. A homeless woman who has seen the ups and downs of the town for years. All of these people have their own stories as well. And what about the people who we interact with more often? Warren was Max's closest friend at school, and as awkward as he was, they were great friends and he always had her back. Frank and his dog, they're all that they've got in the world. And let's not forget about Kate. We spent the first half of the game trying to ensure that she stays alive, but we would be throwing away all of that hard work. And Alyssa the reader, I mean, we can't just let her die. Who's gonna read those trashy romance novels? Chloe's mom, David, Victoria, Warren, Kate, Alyssa, random background character number 54, they would all be gone. This wasn't my first time seeing this game, so I knew ahead of time what was gonna happen. I even knew what choice I was gonna make, but if I'm being honest, when I finally got to this part, I was feeling a little torn. I know what I had planned to do, but imagining the other side of it felt nice. I mean, I was struggling so much that I even messaged my own best friend so that she could lend me some of her infinite wisdom on the situation. Ultimately though, I had to make a decision. I chose to sacrifice Chloe.
Being together this week, it was the best farewell gift I could have hoped for.
No matter which ending you choose, both outcomes are heartbreaking. Watching as Max sits on the ground helplessly while her best friend's death unfolds just a couple of feet away from her is hard. The cutscene continues with Max finally waking up in her new and permanent timeline. She's on the edge of the cliff looking over the town that she saved at the cost of her best friend's life. The music begins to build up as Arcadia-based citizens walk into Chloe's funeral service. This action cannot be undone. Max has already torn the photo to ensure that she won't be able to change her mind. We see Joyce being comforted by David, who looks just as devastated as everyone else, likely regretting the fact that he was never able to be the stepfather that Chloe needed. We also see Frank watching from a distance with his dog, paying his respects. As Max looks onto the grave of her friend, she spots the same butterfly from before, and it lands gently on the coffin, bringing the story and its themes to an end. She watches as the butterfly flies away, with a small smile on her face, contempt for the choice that she made because, even though it wasn't an easy decision, it ultimately is what Chloe wanted. Alternatively, if you choose to save Chloe, they would watch the storm slowly take over Arcadia, and the story would end with Max and Chloe both driving through the remains of the town and out of Arcadia, finally fulfilling their long-awaited wish of leaving. Both are incredibly bittersweet, and none of them feel like the right choice. In the end, there's no real way of winning. I'm not really here to debate which is a better option. I think that depends on the player themselves. I leaned more towards the one that I chose, but even after finishing the game and recording, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice. Sure, it was the, quote-unquote right choice, but Max has been left to deal with the burden of everything that she went through all on her own. How do you even begin to fathom something like that, let alone when no one is around to remember it? It's also just nice to imagine that there could be an ending where Max and Chloe are together living their best lives. Minor spoilers for Life is Strange 2, but towards the end of the second game, you actually get to meet David years after the events of the game, regardless of your ending. If you chose to save Chloe, you can eavesdrop on a conversation he has on the phone with her. From it, we learned that Max and Chloe are both in New York together and, just living it up, and I can only assume that Max was able to get the photographic career of her dreams. It's also great to see that in this version of events, Chloe kept in close contact with David and they were finally able to repair their relationship. If anything, the disaster probably brought them closer together. A lot of players, including myself, grew really close to these two characters, and the idea of them being happy in the future is reassuring. But then again, would they really be happy after the storm? I feel like they would have to live with the guilt of essentially sacrificing thousands of people for their sake. And then again, it's not like we can really blame Max for whatever decision she makes. She, again, never asked to be put in the position that she was, and she tried her best to be careful with her powers, but it's kind of hard when everything around her was falling apart. And I'm now just realizing that we don't actually know what happens to her powers after this. For some reason, I always just assumed that she lost them, but they never really tell us. Does she just have these powers forever? I mean, I would imagine that due to everything, she just wouldn't use them, but it's scary to think that she's just forced to carry around the burden for the rest of her life. At least if she had her friend with her, she'd be able to cope better. I honestly don't really know if I made the right choice or not. Growing up at any stage of life, especially in your early high school years, can be difficult. You go through a lot of phases and changes while trying to figure out who you are as a person, all while trying to come to the terms with the changing world around you. You're no longer a kid who can get by with other people's guidance, but a maturing adult who has to learn how to maneuver life with a new set of responsibilities. It's really no surprise why so many teenagers go through an emo phase in high school. It can be a lot to deal with. Coming-of-age stories that follow high school students is nothing new, and it's no wonder why people love them so much. We can almost see ourselves in the main character's shoes with this type of storytelling. We get to experience their struggles side by side with them and find a sense of comfort when they overcome their obstacles. Of course, in order to do this, you need to have a good main character. Someone that is relatable and likable, but also flawed and human. Good enough so that we can actively root for them, but not perfect to the point where they lose any sense of personality. When it comes to Life is Strange, they succeed in delivering us a great main character. Maybe it's because I related to her awkwardness or her inability to form coherent sentences from time to time when it came to socializing with strangers, but I really loved Max as a character. Maxine Caulfield, don't mind me using her full legal name by the way, is the typical introverted and creative main character that we often see in coming-of-age stories. But of course, there's more to her than just the trope that she fits into. The thing about making introverted characters is that it can be kind of easy to mess up on. They can end up being too bland and boring, lacking any real sense of personality and depth. Yet with Max, I never once felt like she was just a copy and pasted character trope, but instead a deeply layered character. Max is a high school senior with an artistic talent for photography. From one of the first moments that we're introduced to her, we're shown this in the setting of her photography class. Not only are we shown her passion for art, but also her complete lack of self-confidence. We watch her struggle to answer a question that she once knew the answer to in class, and fall victim to her own insecurities when she destroys a photograph that she took, one that could have skyrocketed her career in that field. The Max that we see at the start of the game finds it so difficult to believe in herself that she would go as far as to sabotage her own chances at a bright future. I think this is a great way to hook a player into its story. It's safe to say that everyone has doubted themselves at one point or another. It doesn't really matter how good you are at something, you can never truly stop that part of your brain whose sole purpose is to bring you down. With that, we're already sort of bonded with this character. We can start to see a part of ourselves in her, which makes it easy to root for her. We want to see her succeed and overcome the insecurities that are holding her back, because it's something that we've all dealt with. As the story progresses, we're shown more and more of her difficulties when it comes to making friends, and the occasional bullying that she has to endure from her classmates. But the thing that I really liked about Max's character was that she didn't let this bring her down. Even from the start, we get the sense that despite all of her doubts, she is still someone with a strong sense of will hidden underneath everything. She speaks out against a family whose power and influence runs the town, putting herself in danger in the process just so that she can help a stranger in the bathroom. Of course, this stranger turns out to be Chloe, but at the time she didn't know who she was. She also goes out of her way time and time again for her classmates, and especially for her friend. As the story progresses even further, Max eventually manages to break out of her metaphorical shell. She doesn't get a magical personality change or anything, she's still our favorite awkward and dorky Max, but in place of her previous doubts and insecurities is a strong-willed character who talks back to a literal serial killer. It was great to watch the main character gain the confidence that she needed and to continue to follow her empathetic nature to the end. We can especially see Max's strong will when it comes to her powers. I know one of the biggest questions that can often arise when playing this game is, why did Max get these powers? What was even the point if there ever was one at all? When it comes to this aspect, I don't think we should be focusing on the why, but more on the what she did with them, how she handled them. The game never goes out of its way to find the origins of these powers, and I think it's for a reason. They don't want you to focus on why these circumstances happen to be, because it's not the point of your story. Oftentimes, bad or difficult things happen to people just because. There's no real reason or cause, it just sort of comes out of left field. The important thing though is how we handle them. And Max didn't just lie in her room and spiral into insanity after discovering her new abilities, though to be honest, it's probably what I would do. But she stood up to the challenge and used them to help everyone around her. That's an incredibly strong thing to do in my opinion. Yes, of course, she did feel the pressure of all of her responsibilities and she did fall a few times, but each time she got back up with a new sense of strength and she continued to face the challenges head on. I would argue that Max is a strong main character, not in the sense that she's leading a bunch of people or that she's, I don't know, beating people up or something, but in the way that she refuses to let the world bring her down. We watch her go through hoops just to save the people close to her over and over again without once giving up. It's one of the reasons why I really love her, and watching her slowly grow into this strong character was really rewarding. Max set out to show us that we can overcome our doubtful thoughts that threaten to bring us down, and I really loved following her point of view. I haven't actually seen a lot of criticisms when it comes to Max, but there is one character that I have seen a lot of criticism for. Like, a lot. Like, so much. Enough to the point where it was kind of one of the biggest things that inspired me to make this video in the first place. So buckle in and get ready for me to ramble on for hours about my favorite character in this entire video game, Chloe. So before we really get into this, there's one very important question that we need to answer, and that is Chloe Price a good person? Now, that right there is a very good question, and the answer to that is yes, but also no. But ultimately, yes, she is. Chloe Price is complicated, to say the least. Like many complex characters, she's deeply flawed, and this can lead a lot of people to dislike her. At her worst, Chloe is someone who is very destructive and lacks the levels of responsibility needed to keep herself and everyone around her safe. She's reckless and often doesn't know her limits, both with situations and with other people. She never shies away from speaking her mind, and this can be both very admirable as well as very irritating at times. But for every character flaw is a strength. We see again and again that underneath her self-destructive habits, Chloe is a very loyal and caring friend to those she loves. And think what you will about her attitude, but she gets things done and fights back against any authority figure that tries to put her down. Aside from that, that, what makes Chloe such a compelling character is how flawed and complex she is. She has a lot of issues underneath her tough facade, which causes her to act the way that she does, and seeing this slowly unravel and come to light, as well as seeing how she changes, makes her such an entertaining character. Chloe was just a kid when her life fell apart completely. Her dad, who she was very close to, died, leaving her and her mom to struggle, and she wasn't even able to fully process her grief because her only real support system, her best friend Max, quickly left soon after this accident. This shifted the trajectory of her life, and she began to spiral even further when her mom married the one man she couldn't even stand to be around, essentially betraying her in Chloe's eyes. When Chloe did finally meet someone after so many years of relentless anger and grief, Rachel, she was quickly taken away from her as well. Chloe grew up with the constant feeling of betrayal and loneliness. She grew up knowing the pain that came with opening up to someone, only for them to abandon her soon after. It's because of this that she lashes out at other people, and as annoying as she was at the start of the game with her constant remarks to Max about her abandoning her, she had a reason for doing this. Why would Chloe risk allowing someone in her life again if she knows that it's only going to lead to the same agonizing heartbreak that she has lived with for her entire life? Of course, this doesn't excuse Chloe at her worst times, but it's an explanation of what she struggles against. Even though I love this character, she's not perfect. One of her worst moments, which is the moment that is brought up often because it's honestly just terrible, is her toxic reaction to Max getting a phone call from Kate. Kate was in desperate need of help, and Chloe's reaction to Max answering her friend was to get angry and possessive. It's a 2-second call. You can wait 2 seconds. It's literally not the end of the world. She does end up apologizing for this later on in one of the episodes, but it's just an awful moment all around, and it shows Chloe's worst traits. And I'm also not going to forget about the time when she tried stealing money from a charity, like a literal charity. So yes, Chloe isn't perfect, not by any means, but as the story progresses, so does she. We get to slowly see her open up and get the sense that she truly does love and care about the people close to her. Take episode 1 for example, when Chloe gives Max her father's old Polaroid camera. This is someone that Chloe hadn't seen for in years, but deep down she still cares for her. And it wasn't any regular present either, it was something that belonged to her father. This was likely one of the last physical memories she had of him, and you could even see her sort of struggle and hesitate before ultimately deciding to gift it to Max. When it comes to Max's power, Chloe is very irresponsible with it at the start. She treats her power as some sort of toy and doesn't really grasp the seriousness of it all, which eventually leads Max to get a nosebleed and pass out in a junkyard. It's after this moment, though, that Chloe stops with her reckless attitude and begins to take things seriously when it comes to Max's power. She has seen how much the rewind is hurting her friend, and this is the last instance that Chloe ever insists that Max uses it for her own gain. Aside from the party in the 4th episode, but to be fair, she had just discovered what happened to Rachel, so she wasn't really in the clearest of headspaces. Max is also the only person that Chloe opens up to and decides to fully trust, which, knowing her past, wasn't something she could easily do. Chloe isn't a heartless monster who loves breaking the rules, she's a loyal partner who will do anything for those she cherishes. Aside from her character development, she's just all around a fun character. This is especially true when it comes to her dynamic with the main character. We see Max interacts with some of her other friends like Warren, Kate, our Queen Alyssa, and even Miss Juliet Watson.
What's my last name?
And while all of those interactions are fine and well on their own, none of them can even come close to the dynamic between her and Chloe. They are two opposing forces that bring out the best in each other. Max with her calming presence and reasoning stops Chloe from committing literal crimes, and she also brings the happiness and stability that she had been missing in her life. On the other hand, Chloe's boldness pushes Max to stand up for herself and to be braver, and her influence is what leads Max to overcome her fears and doubts. They were also just entertaining together. I mean, there was never a second where they were both on screen that I ever felt bored, and I looked forward to every one of their interactions. There was one final part that I want to go over before I move on to the rest of the characters that I'm going to cover, and that's the ending. The ending and the entirety of episode 5 shows us just how much this character has changed through the story. As we covered earlier, at the end of their journey, Max and Chloe realized that the entirety of Arcadia Bay was seconds away from being destroyed. Arcadia Bay was a town that was full of so many dark memories for Chloe, and it was full of people that she never once cared about. We're shown multiple times that she has little to no attachment left to the town, and she should have no reason to care for it, but ultimately she does. In the end, it's Chloe who decides to sacrifice everything for the town she hated. Just by looking at the scene itself, you can see the pain in her face when she comes to the realization that only her sacrifice can stop all of this, and it's saddening to see. But she doesn't keep this realization to herself or even beg Max to let her live. Instead, she embraces this and puts her own life on the line. This moment is when her character arc comes to its end, with her realizing that there is still good in people despite their flaws and despite the ways that they have hurt her in the past. She realizes that in this moment, her life can amount to so much more than just being a disappointment in her family, or the troubled teenager who had been kicked out of school, who was seen as never being able to amount to anything. She was given the chance to change all of that and to do one last act of kindness that would defy everything people thought of her, and that she was instead worth more than what she thought she was. Chloe may not be the easiest character to root for at times. We see this through multiple instances in the game, but where she lacks self-control and basic manners and all of that. She makes up for it in sheer self-assurance and confidence, as well as with her undying loyalty. She's a complex character, and that's what makes her so special and intriguing. Life is Strange would not be Life is Strange without Chloe by Max's side.
She is very gorgeous to me!
As much as I would love to ramble on and on about my beloved Chloe, I do need to move on so that this thing doesn't end up being longer than what it already is. Aside from Max's rewind ability, the story mostly relies on the mystery to drive its plot. That is, the mystery of what happened to Rachel Amber and everyone involved. This is, again, another thing that I think the game did a really good job at. I'm not really an expert on mysteries myself, but despite my limited understanding of that genre, I liked the mystery in this game as a whole. Like any good mystery, this one has layers to it. There are countless clues left around in the game for you to sort through as the game goes on. The Prescott family's influence on the town, the depth of Kate's bullying and what happened to her on that night, the mystery surrounding Rachel's disappearance, why Warren still thinks he has a chance with Max. All of these were just a few examples of the separate mysteries in this game that were all connected in one way or another. Even though there was a lot to unpack and piece together, I think they managed to get tied up nicely in the end. There were no glaring plot holes as far as I know, and I enjoyed getting to piece the story together alongside the characters. Every single episode offered more clues, and each one got you closer to understanding the bigger picture. The game set out to create a good mystery, and it did just that in my opinion. So what about the reveal itself? This is something that I found myself sort of struggling with. I couldn't decide if I had liked the execution or not, and originally I had actually written a whole different argument as to why I didn't like it, but after giving it more thought, I actually really liked having Mr. Jefferson be revealed as the secret mastermind behind everything. The thing about Mark Jefferson's story is that it's terrifyingly realistic. Mr. Jefferson was someone that everyone thought they could trust in Arcadia Bay. He was a renowned photographer who served as a role model to his students. We hear a couple of times from the characters about how lucky Blackwell is to have had him decide to teach there, although now we know the real reasons behind his sudden inspiration to become a high school professor. Oftentimes, the people we think we're supposed to trust end up being the worst kinds of people out there, and this is the turn that Life is Strange took. The villain in the story wasn't some evil maniac living in a big scary mansion in the woods. He was a trusted adult who took advantage of his position as a role model. It's a sick story as well as a cautionary one that speaks about the cruelty of everyday people. The Jefferson we see in Blackwell is very different from the one that we encounter in the dark room. This is something that I've seen people sort of criticize the game for, and again, originally I also really wasn't on board with this sudden personality switch. It wasn't until I began going over the footage of the game again that I realized that the decision to have him act so differently actually ended up fitting his character perfectly. As I've said before, Jefferson was a trusted adult who many students looked to for guidance, so it was a little weird having him go from this charismatic and calming teacher to this complete psychopath who would have random sudden outbursts.
Stay still!
It almost feels like they're not the same person, but if you think about it, the way he acted in the dark room actually makes sense. Jefferson spends most of his time hiding who he truly is, when deep down he's a horrible, manipulative monster. He puts on this act, and it's in this way that he tricks everyone around him into thinking that he's a good person. But once he's in the dark room in front of Max, he no longer clings to this act anymore. It's not because he suddenly has a personality change, but because he has no reason to hide the truth from Max because he doesn't plan on letting her live. What does he have to lose if she finds out who he really is if she's not going to make it to the next day? His secret would die with her, so he has nothing to hold back. Besides, we still get remnants of who he was before. He still speaks in a calming, although now more cynical voice, and he's still trying to somewhat mentor Max in his own sick and twisted way, lecturing her about how she has so much wasted potential. In the end, he's still the same person that we saw at the start of the game. I really liked the way he acted in the dark room because it showed us not only his true personality hidden underneath everything, but also how he managed to go around manipulating everyone around him, which was by pretending, because he really is a charismatic character, and that's exactly how he tricked everyone. One thing that I loved about this game was the attention that it gave to most of, if not all of its characters. From the main ones to random NPCs we see walking around, all of them felt to a certain degree well developed. I've already talked about Max and Chloe, but I want to give some attention to the side characters. It's pretty safe to say that a lot of people found it easy to like Kate, and this played in the game's favor when it came to its themes of bullying. The first half of the game is spent on Kate and the cruelty she faces from her classmates. The game pays a lot of attention to Kate so that we can get attached to her, and in this way they get us hooked into the devastating results that come of her bullying. If they had instead given Kate little screen time, then her story wouldn't really be as impactful. We would still see the results, but by having us really get to know Kate and to sympathize with her, they truly got us to see the horrible effects of bullying, as well as how our words and actions can affect people in deeper ways than we may think. The game could have done an even better job with this if it had developed the main bully herself, Victoria, just a little bit more. I don't think Victoria is underdeveloped in the sense that she didn't have a personality, because she definitely did. I mean, just from the first couple minutes of the game itself, we can see that she's full of confidence and personality, but I just wish that we would have seen a bit more from her, because her sudden switch from being bad to good just felt a little bit rushed in my opinion. I'm not saying that we needed an entire side quest with her, but she continued to be pretty ruthless throughout the entire game, and we didn't see much of a change from her until that sudden change in, I think, episode 4. I felt like Victoria had a lot of potential, and I just wish we would have gotten more of that. On the topic of villains, I'll briefly go over the game's biggest red herring, David. Again, I won't go into too much detail since I've already talked about him while I was going over the episodes, but I really appreciate that, despite his flaws, he was still giving him redemption, and Dave was one that I felt progressed well with the story. Unlike Victoria, we did get to see him change and act differently up until the very end. He still had a lot to work through as a character, but at the end of episode 5, we got to see his remorse over how he has treated everyone around him, and we learned that there is more to him than just being someone who is deeply paranoid. He is a person who cares about his family and would do anything to protect them. There are a number of other characters that I could touch on, but I should really wrap this up since this is gonna end up being longer than it should be. But the thing that I'm really trying to highlight is that the developers really put a lot of work into creating a town full of realistic feeling characters. This was all done for the sake of the final decision, but it also just made Arcadia Bay feel like a real town that you could accidentally stumble upon during a road trip down Oregon. I loved that you were able to talk to other characters, even the ones that weren't really important to the story, because it made the game feel alive and oddly cozy. The game's final choice comes down to choosing between one person and thousands of others. This would have been an easy choice if we hadn't known any of the Arcadia citizens that we had to choose over, but we did. We got to know Max's classmates, her teachers, her best friends, and even the residents who had their own unique stories. It made the final decision have much more weight, and it resulted in an impactful and emotional ending, regardless of what you chose. The characters are one of this game's best aspects, and I really needed to give them the credit that they were due. Before I end this review, I want to quickly go over some small details in this game that made it such a great experience. The music in this game was phenomenal. The main soundtrack fits the nostalgic and indie feel of the game in such a perfect way, and it doesn't just stop there. We meet a few characters who have their own music tastes, and each one feels so unique to them while also fitting the overall game. The acting is another thing that I felt was done amazingly. Max's voice actress never failed to hook me into the story. She provided the perfect soft and shaky tone to fit Max's soft-spoken personality, and she did an amazing job when it came to the difficult scenes, especially in the ending. I could feel Max's emotions alongside her, and it made the game that much more enjoyable. It's pretty much no secret that Chloe is my favorite character in this game, and that's partly because of the voice acting. Her voice was so iconic throughout the game, and Chloe's voice actress did an amazing job and was incredibly talented. She gave Chloe that perfect boldness, but was also able to bring it down for the emotional parts of the game. The scene where they discover Rachel's whereabouts was something that the story had been building up to, and it was made 10 times more impactful by Chloe's line delivery. Her actress made it sound like there was genuine terror and pain in her voice, and it was enough to give me chills when I saw it again after so many years. The rest of the supporting cast was really good too, in my opinion, especially for a smaller game like this. While there were maybe a few awkward voice lines here and there, it never really took me out of the game. Lastly, I want to go over the scenery and the art. There are some amazing cinematic shots in this game and cutscenes, and you can just tell that they put so much work into creating them. When the game wanted you to be scared, it did so by creating a dark atmosphere and pairing it with eerie music. When it wanted you to feel happy and relaxed, it created these warm scenes, and they were beautiful to look at. It managed to convey the emotions they wanted you to feel. This is a game that has a lot of work put into it from both a development standpoint and from the actors, and it all came together to create a beautiful game that fans still remember after so many years. I wish I could find the right words to truly describe just how much I love this game and how much it means to me. At the start of the video, I realized that I sort of make a lot of excuses for this game. I say things like, this game may not be the best, but, or it's not the best game out there, but. Yet, after recording and going through this whole process and spending so much time slowly growing to love this game even more, I realize now that the attitude that I had about this game at the start of the video was unfair. I was just giving this game a bunch of backhanded compliments instead of actual praise, but Life is Strange deserves more than that. This game may not be everyone's favorite, and that's okay. Many may not like the writing or the dialogue, and a lot of people might not even like the characters themselves. Every game has flaws, but the flaws in this game are what make it special. It's an imperfect project created with what I can only call a genuine effort and love, and this is something that I didn't even fully realize until I neared the end of this video. I, of course, can't, necessarily speak for the creators of the game. I don't know any of them, so I'm simply going off of assumptions, but as you play this game, you can get the sense that it was made with a lot of love. You can sort of look at it as a piece of art if you want to. A lot of work was put into creating the vision that they had in mind, and it was achieved through all of the little details that they perfected. The music in this game was chosen carefully to fit its nostalgic and cozy indie feeling, and every cutscene left you with a mix of emotions that pulled you deeper into the story. Then there's the beautiful art style that we see in both the episode art and in the in-game photography and concept art. What I really want to say is that it was made with real effort and care. This game feels like someone's passion project, like someone's vision brought to life that was carefully crafted through and through. It's one of the main reasons as to why fans of the game love it so much, because of the authenticity that radiates from it. We look past its flaws and mistakes because we see the glaring beauty of its strengths. Art isn't perfect. Every piece of art has its own unique style, its own mistakes and its own flaws, but also its own strengths. I loved everything that this game was offering. I loved our main characters whose dynamics made me come back after every episode, eager to see where the story would take them. I loved the music and the atmospheric setting, the intriguing mystery and themes, and I loved getting to know the characters and breaking down what motivated each one of them. Life is Strange was one of the earliest games that I had watched a playthrough of, and it holds so many fond childhood memories for me. It's one of the reasons that I discovered my love for story-based video games, and I still play them to this day. Coming back after so many years only made me love it more, as I was able to notice the smaller details, and it's kept me coming back to the rest of the games in the series. I understand that this game may not be for everyone, and that's, completely okay. My reasoning behind making this video was a bit outdated. I created it because back when I first discovered this game, there were a lot of negative reviews for it. Like I've said at the start, there's nothing wrong with criticizing a game, of course, but I really wanted to come back and explain why it meant so much to its fans. When I first started this whole project, I had thought that this game was nothing but a forgotten memory. And I'm really glad to see that to this day, people are still appreciating it, and there's a whole hidden fan base that I didn't even know about. I hope that even if you watched the entirety of this video and you're still not convinced, that you could at least see another perspective of it. And at the very least, I really hope you enjoyed my dumb little edits because I had a lot of fun making them. Life is Strange isn't just a game about broken relationships and universe-altering powers. It's about so much more. The topics it covers are things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis and are still relevant in our current times. This game set out to talk about a lot of things, and even though it must have been challenging to fit in so many themes in one game, they did an excellent job at it. The biggest takeaway from this video game is the idea of cause and effect. Everything that we say and do, or on the contrary, don't say and don't do, has a bigger impact than what we can really know. The game reminds us to think of our choices carefully because, unlike its main character, we can't go back and fix our mistakes. What we can do is learn from them and choose to improve. It's not only a cautionary lesson, but one that reminds us of our hidden potential. We can't let ourselves be ruled by our doubts and insecurities because if we do, we're going to miss out on so much that life has to offer. We only really have one chance at life, so we should make sure that we're getting the most out of it while we can. Ignore your fears for just a quick second and go after what you've wanted to. Go write that long rant about how much you love that character. Go try that new skill you've always wanted to go after. Go submit that photo into your local photography contest. Because if you don't do it now, you never will. The smallest decisions can alter the course of our lives in more ways than we know. So don't miss out on your chances because you're too scared to step out of your comfort zone. Or don't listen to my advice. Again, I really am just some random stranger who can barely manage to clean her room, so probably not the best person to seek life-altering advice from. But regardless, I really truly hope you enjoyed this video. And if you made it all the way through, or even if you just watched a few parts and gave it a chance, I honestly really want to thank you. This video took an incredibly long time to make. Roughly a year from absolute start to finish because of my lack of experience with editing and video making and all of that. But regardless of all of that, I had an amazing time creating this, and it means the world to me that you even, took time out of your day to listen to me ramble. I would love to revisit the series and create similar videos like this one, but I'd also really like to create entirely separate deep dives on different topics in the near future. Thank you so much for reaching the end of this video. Again, I really appreciate it. Stay hydrated, stay warm, and most importantly, stand Chloe Price, the best character in Life is Strange.